not having a solution, as if that were my obligation to have a solution. I can tell you guys one thing. Whatever your strife might be, your own way or something else entirely, if it's the case that given our current environment, given our modernity, given our tech, given our comfort, given our safety and levels of safeness, well, it might be that given this environment we live in, it's no longer possible to reconcile the differences between the sexes. I mean, let's face it, men and women want profoundly different things. And the only thing we have in common, again, in the general sense, is our desire to replicate our genes, which, by the way, as all of you know, we go about in completely different ways. What's the problem to begin with? That's the problem to begin with. So, this is something that terrifies people who aren't going their own way. Terrifying about Midtown. We ask tough questions, and sometimes we reach unpleasant conclusions. I mean, I think over the years, Carlos and I have provided enough evidence to show you that there is no harmonious bond between the sexes. And certainly in this modern environment of give or take and government teeth, even less so. So it's true that I don't have a solution, and I don't think I should have a solution to all these problems. You know, I'm not here to build a family. I'm here to walk my own individual path and help men discover themselves and understand the world. But I don't shrink back from the tough questions. Nor do I shrink away or back from the tough conclusions. I tell you guys one thing. Whatever the outcome of all of this in years to come, if there's going to be any sort of arrangement, and I suppose there will be, have to be some kind of arrangement between men and women, it's not going to be a good one unless it's made while taking into account all the circumstances of men and women, that is, objectively looking at the facts and how men and women interact with each other. We don't have time or money, for that matter, for the pretense anymore. This needs to be dropped. And the adult fairy tale that's ongoing until you drop dead, that needs to be dropped. And therein lies the fear. I mean, from that little problem, which is actually a huge problem for most human beings, thereby comes, well, fear of being alone versus lonely. And mind you, MGTOW, fortunately, most MGTOW know the distinction. Most MGTOW realize that loneliness is not the same thing as being alone. And yet we're constantly asked this question, some of us at least. You, Logan. Oh, you don't want to be that guy at some arbitrary age, 45. You don't want to be that guy at 45, 55, 65, and so on, at the club or at the restaurant or and so on and so forth. Remember, guys, every time someone asks you that ridiculous question, they're not asking you the question, they're posing the question to themselves. They're just a mirror reflection of their fears as men go in their own way. Their fears. You realize that loneliness and aloneness are completely distinct words with distinct meanings. You can be surrounded by throngs of people in some megacity like Tokyo or Seoul or London or New York or for that matter, you can be hiking the Adirondacks or the Catskills or the Highlands of Scotland, completely alone, but not lonely. You see, being alone is a physical state that cannot be avoided. And I would argue that whether you're surrounded by millions of people or no one, being alone is a fundamental fact of human existence. Our thoughts are cut off from other people. Our soul stuff, for the most part, is even inaccessible to the people who the originators of the soul stuff. I mean, Stardust doesn't know all of his soul stuff. So being alone is something that's fundamental to the human condition. Loneliness is a state of mind. Most people don't understand the distinction. They confuse the two. That's why they spend most of their lives desperately trying to chase it away. They surround themselves with people, there's distractions. Women are particularly bad at this, as you know, right? Most women can't stand a second being alone. Men, on the other hand, by our very nature, we're thrust into that state of aloneness. We know we're alone. But it's up to us and our mastery of the self to make the decision. It is a decision of whether we're lonely or not. In earlier incarnations of myself, many years ago, I might have stood at Piccadilly Circus or downtown New York or some mega Asian megacity like Seoul, and I might have felt lonely. Or for that matter, in a small village in the Black Forest of Germany, which I used to live in many years ago. It didn't really make a difference. It's just a state of mind. People who don't go their own way, well, pretty much everyone, right? They don't get that. But women don't get it at all. Most women. Men, they kind of get that there's a distinction, but they still feel that loneliness factor. And, of course, whence comes male mother need and all these other issues, right? The desire to seek out that nurturing goddess who's going to take it away. Women are, for the most part, just too shallow-minded and shallow-brained to even grasp these concepts. And besides, they're always surrounded by people anyway, so they have so much white noise and negative feedback in their heads that it's never even occurs to them. Men have to struggle with it. So that's another reason to fear MGTOW, because we just turn the mirror back at people asking these questions. me lonely? No, you're the lonely one, and that's why you're asking me this ridiculous question to begin with. But much more fundamentally, I mean, MGTOW is the source of fear to people because we just ask these fucking questions that no one else is willing to ask. I'm often accused of not being academically qualified to even ask these questions, right? Being academic qualification for everything, supposedly. I should stick to, I don't know, linguistics and medieval Germanic literature, right? Well, it might be that I'm not academically qualified to ask some of these questions or reach some of these conclusions in the strictest sense. But let's face it, academia's failed us in these issues that are most important, right? Academia has completely failed us because they're too bound up by political correctness and political bullshit, the fear of offense. I don't give a shit about causing offense. I care about what's true. And truth, the pursuit of knowledge, the unquenchable thirst for knowledge is something that's innate to the male, and I believe nowhere better embodied than in MGTOW itself. You see, it falls to us as individuals to try to understand the world we live in, human nature, men and women, because the people who are supposed to be doing their jobs, you know, the professional evolutionary psychologist, the evolutionary biologist, the people studying the interaction between economics and biology, all these people, they failed us. They failed us because they're afraid to take it to the next level. They reach conclusions of a sort, but never move beyond that. I'm constantly reminded of that 2004 study of Rutgers University where they talk about female in-group preference. Never seen like before, which of course is going to lead you to the conclusion as well. It's only been done once and it hasn't been replicated. It's probably not true, and yet it has been replicated over and over and over again, anecdotally, in our lives, in our observations, in newspaper articles. We see it everywhere. Why isn't there more academic research being done? Fear. Fear. This is a fear that we do not have. It's a fear of the normal people, quote unquote, the normal people. See, MGTOW is scary to people. We don't buy the fairy tales. We don't buy the bullshit. And we are relentless in trying to understand ourselves and the world, and as the world relates to us as men. Not many people do that. They're content with their Marxist cabal bullshit or their political this or that. That's enough for them. It's enough to say, oh, the big bad boogeyman goes to feminism, and ooh, that's it. Now, we say there's something much deeper going on here, something much more dangerous. And it's dangerous because most people are just refusing to acknowledge it and just ignoring it flat out. We can't afford it anymore. So let the world be fearful. Let them feel the fear. It's good. The beautiful thing about MGTOW is once you absorb enough knowledge, it's impossible to return back. See, there's a tear in the veil, and it's being ripped wider and wider open. Each day, every time a new video comes out, every time Barbarossa makes a video investigating the human conscious nature, the way women interact, that tear in the veil is going to grow wider and wider as time goes by. And it's true, I don't have any fundamental answers for the future. I don't know how to rebuild a family unit, and quite frankly, I'm not interested in that. But as I said, going forward, if we do not, I'll say it slowly, if we do not look at human beings in the full light of truth, as they are, with all the good and bad behaviors of men and the good and bad behaviors of women, and just accept them and say, this is the shit pile that we're sitting in right now, and try to make something of it, we're just going to continue to leave the fuck out of ourselves, and quite frankly, it is dangerous. Okay? It's dangerous for men, because the love fairy tale, the love lie that's perpetuated throughout our adult lives, as well as children, is ultimately what gets men killed. They kill themselves, they overwork themselves, they work themselves to death, and we can't afford that. And of course, that's part of the disappointment in the quote-unquote MRN, right? They've ceased talking truth to power. They ceased that a long time ago. Now there's just a bunch of, I don't know, politicians maneuvering about on the chessboard. It's ridiculous. That's why I don't see any connection between MGTOW and MRN. We're relentless in our pursuit of knowledge. We want to help men, and we don't care about the cost. That is, we don't care about the offense we might cause. We offend people who fucking cares. And they need to know the truth. Frankly, the world needs to know the truth. And women need to get off their asses and start reflecting upon themselves. Sometimes I think it's impossible for them. But, I mean, apart from all the evolutionary baggage that we've been dragging around with ourselves all the time, we have all the social conditioning that comes from it. I mean, women need to start doing this the way men have done it for eons. And MGTOW is just the next step for men to take it to the next level. Women need to start doing this at the very start and then move on progressively. I don't see it happening, but it's the only way forward. We need to get all the rubbish, all the fairy tales, all the pretense out of the way, and start building something like what we have as it actually is. Well, until then, to paraphrase John Galt, we are going to stay that fear-corroded haven. But not MGTOW. Let them be afraid. Let them come. We're doing the right thing. Everyone take care. I want to talk today about fear. And believe it or not, fear is something that's integral to MGTOW. Sounds good, odd, sounds, well, doesn't make any sense.
Good Will Hunting. What?
MP was great.
Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm.
This guy, try to imagine that Eddie's not there. And instead just look at that circle underneath him. That's actually what's moving. When I'm moving the controller around, that circle, if you just stare at it, that is the core physics engine that your controller is pushing around. And so what happens there is that there's a constant physical model that has determined that, like, okay, if I'm running this way at this speed and I want to go that way, it's going to slow itself down and move in the other direction. The problem then on the current engine, which FIFA invented, basically, I mean, some people use this, it's not FIFA, but it was FIFA's engine. Wait, the Frostbite engine? Well, it was actually called Ant back then. Frostbite came from DICE, then they called it Ignition. They all make these things. They're not real. It's the whole core down at the bottom is that the animation moves the player. Not the cylinder, not the circle order. The animation moves the player. And so that animation has movements baked into it. That character taking those steps moves that many steps in the game. And effectively then, you have to be like hyper perfect when you animate things, that their feet move the correct distance for, like, say, a max speed player, and then you slow the animation down a little bit or whatever for a slower speed player. But what happens then is that there's no really good underlying physics model underneath to maintain momentum as well as it did back then. And if you can get up videos, I'm sure you could show it, or we could find some of the current animation. It's the thing that drives me nuts about it the most, is that they still haven't addressed, and I think it'd be one of the biggest things. Is like, if you put some sort of momentum back into the engine underneath, and you try to play animations on top of this dot, this circle, you would not have these issues of players accelerating and moving through at unrealistic rates. Like, you can watch players right now in almost every play in Madden or college, where they run their route, they come out of the route, and they just warp and immediately snap to like a new angle at full speed. And it's like no momentum was preserved because they're just playing that animation out there. And they're snapping into the new animation state, which is also an animation. And there is physics, of course, underneath, but it's not the same as this physics, which is like one true physics model. It's basically a series of these things moving together. And that's why you get such janky accelerations and decelerations. And like they come out of a broken tackle and then they speed up really fast, or a he gets it back, is backpedaling, and then he just warps over here. It's like, because the animation is moving and not the underlying core physics model.
Tonight we're learning more about the brutal murder of a 10-year-old girl. Thanks for joining us. From 12 News at 10, I'm Mark Curtis.
And I'm Patty Devine. The girl's father and his girlfriend are charged in her death. 12-year-old Bianca Bones obtained court hearing records, and Bianca, the details of this case are just horrifying.
It's such a difficult case to report on, frankly. And in a hearing that happened while 10-year-old Rebecca Baptiste was still on life support at Phoenix Children's Hospital, a prosecutor said his father, Richard Baptiste, admitted to abusing not only Rebecca, but also her two brothers. And we want to warn you, the details in this case are disturbing.
The injuries to the minor child are egregious.
Audio from a July 29th court hearing in Apache County revealing disturbing details about what happened to Rebecca Baptiste. Police found her unresponsive and severely injured on July 27th, and she was ultimately flown to Phoenix Children's Hospital. At the time of this hearing, she was on life support.
She had severe bruising over the majority of her body, especially in the pelvic region. It was incredibly severe, but she also had some markings on her head. And again, she had the subdural hematoma that led to her current state.
Right away, investigators were led to the suspects, Rebecca's father, Richard Baptiste, and his girlfriend, Anicia Woods.
The defendant was interviewed by law enforcement. He read his Miranda rights. He was interviewed. During the course of that interview, he admitted to beating the minor victim with a belt. He admitted that it was excessive force. Those were his terms that he used.
During the
Seeing the face of the teen who stands accused of killing his parents. 14-year-old Trevor Lee faces 2 counts of second-degree murder, and for the first time tonight, we're hearing his voice in the newly released 911 dispatch report. A lot of warning you hear the call made disturbing.
You first? Go ahead, I'll listen to you. Well, I was asked if you could pray for me, man. But I'll definitely be praying for you, son.
Investigators say Lee was outside of church when he dialed 911 and reported himself. He stayed on the phone until deputies got to his location and took him into custody.
News Project reporter Eric Albanese here in studio with us with more of this new information he obtained in this case. Eric?
Yeah, we were able to acquire a lot more information than what we had yesterday when we first reported this story. Now, we now know where in the house the parents were killed and the extent of their fatal injuries. We also found out that the 14-year-old called his aunt in California before he called 911 to turn himself in. Just one day after 44-year-old David Lee and 45-year-old Brandy Smith were found shot to death inside their Silver Oak subdivision home in Middleburg, News for Jackson learned the couple was in their bed when they were shot multiple times. Both were pronounced deceased when paramedics arrived. Investigators identified the killer as the couple's son, 14-year-old Trevor Lee.
He's
After
14.
his parents were murdered, Lee called his aunt in California. She then called Clay County 911 dispatch. What her nephew told her was redacted from the 911 recording.
They're in the house, please. Please. Can help, immediate, ambulance, whatever, immediately.
The teen traveled to a nearby church parking lot and called 911. He stayed on the line until deputies arrived to take him into custody.
By the road, do my backpack away from me. I'm waiting for the police. What do you mean you're scared? In my pocket. I emptied my pockets and everything. There's nothing in my pocket.
While most of his conversation with the dispatcher was redacted, we hear him ask the dispatcher to pray for him.
You first? Go ahead, I'll listen to you. Well, I was asked if you could pray for me.
Fuck you and your gun. I'm praying
But I'll
for you,
definitely
bitch.
be praying for you, son.
I'll definitely be praying for you, son.
Parents are dead in their beds. Retired JSO Director of Investigations turned News for Jack's Crime and Safety analyst Tom Hackney says this was no doubt a heinous crime carried out by a kid, but he also says the fact that the teen called 911 to surrender himself says something.
Instant remorse. When you hear the sound of his voice and you hear kind of what he's going through, aside from the redacted part, you hear some instant remorse, and I think that's kind of bolstered by the fact that he left the scene and goes immediately to call 911 and turn himself in.
Now, the 14-year-old remains in custody at the Regional Juvenile Detention Center in Jacksonville. So far, he has not been charged as an adult.
And goes immediately to call.
Walking and got my freaking wife and her son had his. Oh, fuck. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's American Independence Day 2024, and in the city of Follow, Arkansas, 45-year-old mother of two, Crystal Fallis, and her two sons, younger brother David and 27-year-old Austin, are having a drink to celebrate, like many others. Someone missing though, Crystal's husband, Daniel, the boy's stepfather. He's at work, so the trio decide to start the party early without him. Trio would soon be cut down to a duo though, because at some point during the early afternoon, David decided he was going to hit the hay, leaving his mother and brother drinking alone. During this sleep, ladies and gentlemen, something disturbing occurred. What was that, you may be asking yourself? Well, if you've read the title of this video, you know exactly what that is. So buckle yourself in for this one. Around 3:30 p.m., David was woken up by the sounds of groaning. He was half asleep, so he couldn't quite put his finger on what the noise was or where it was coming from. When he eventually woke up, however, he knew exactly what the sound was. His mother and brother were engaged in activity.
Stupid fucking hillbillies.
His mother, all, and it makes me crazy just saying it, was consensual. Spoiler alert, it was the latter. That's in mind then, he ran to the neighbour's home to call the police. Just moments after fleeing, Daniel arrived home from work. He wasn't greeted by anyone, so decided to take a shower. After, he went to go and see where everyone was, and it was there he spotted Crystal and Austin having sex with each other. They're still going at it, and so it was at that point he too called the police.
That's a messed up time. Walking and got my freaking wife and her son had his sex. I'm 100% serious. She's drunk, he's all get out. He walks through, he gets left. Where's he where? My daughter just lives up there. That's probably where he's at. Well, the guy's working. You know what he's wearing? No, I don't know what time it's on. I don't know. Well, I'm about to have her. I need her on the spot. Hold on. Pass down on this. You don't know what he's wearing. I have no idea. Whatever it is. I just walk his more. Our other son's probably on the back porch. And we've had fights before. We've had like the good ladies. We're out on the door. No physical, nothing at all. Literally, sickest thing I've ever seen in fucking life, dude. When Jack's laying there, you jump out there and ain't her going. It's fixing to be, it's fixing to be fan in, dude. I got to walk in there with me. I got here for a minute, but I talked to her, and she's right there, just out there, open the door. So, the son, does he, how's it going? It's just like the top. I don't know what's going on. That's their son. Is that the one in the bell? Oh, he's fine. Yeah. All right, he's talking himself up. What?
No, I was just talking to him. He was
Who?
him over. I guess he's one that called from over here. Oh, that's all. I called. Okay.
I'm not leaving his side, David. What's going on? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What's wrong with you? You got to fix it. I'm sorry. I'm done with all this. I'm done. I'm done. I can't. Do you see it? Yes, I was in there with you too. Why do you stop it? I can't. It's too big. This shit is too fucking out of hand. What? Probably under the house. Where are they? They're in Summers? Yes, I don't know. Mom's been right here. Yeah. You're fucking gross, Mom. That's all you are. You're fucking nasty. You're fucking nasty. Right here, my husband. You're right here. Keep the door, and I'll do it. Thank you. Mom? 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 You're nasty, Mom. You're nasty. Don't fucking talk about those shit. Don't talk about those shit. Don't. You fucked up, Mom. I need to go step on that. Go step on that. No, what? Just talk to her and see it. Yep. Every time I I'm not leaving the bar if I was not here. Sorry. So you walk in, step one. I'm not waiting to the shower. I'm going to drink and I feel like something. You come in work. You don't do that. And back out. I just got a job. Good job. And that's when you sing. Walk in, I don't have this. He's been talking about all that. Yeah. Okay, but it's not now. No, I'm saying he didn't want to go to the town. He said go in and do something. No. I mean, they're gone. I'm trying to figure out everything. I'm not leaving you outside as long as you're around. That's fine. Just out there or do stuff being cute, playing. I understand. That's fine. Look at me. When I was coming in the door, I heard the talk. He's on top of you. You're back again. Did he get you or where did he get you at? Hey, Kristen, I know he's scared. I know you're scared. But look. Okay, well look. That doesn't change the fact of what he's already done. So what's this? Yeah, can you do that? But you never do first. And you know, that's not. If you start close, I'm gonna come back and talk to you, okay? I can do it. No, I better do it. Oh, we gotta call, so we gotta call that. Roll call, supposedly, you and your son were having criminal lessons,
In the middle?
they were doing, and that's all we did. But I'm trying to talk to him, this relation comes in. The way he comes in, that's when I come in, and that's when it's going on, and I'm coming in that door, and, when I was talking, on top of you with his arms raised back like the 16 issues now. I'm telling you, I think, okay, I'm in that doorway, and he's on top of you with his hands raised back, and fist closed. And that's when I grab a hold of him and start starting to leave. So, he obviously has me telling him, put his hands on his back, put his hands on his back, and he's still trying to pull away from him to get to you. That's why he needs to go back and forth. So, we're trying to figure everything out. Where did he get you at? I understand he's upset from what was coming or what's being said, but where did he meet you at in there whenever I was at that door? I couldn't tell where, okay, guards were right out here. So when I come in the door and he said, your arm is back again on top of you. Whenever I got here, you talking to me, about recycling. Tell me what you mean, you talking about. Like, what do you mean? When I get back, I was like, what the fuck, are you serious? I was like, what the hell's going on now? He kept doing things. And freaking, I was standing there when I kept saying, cheers, you freaking come at me, freaking like, you're swinging me shit. Did you ever contact? No, never. I stayed away. I know better. Not just because of what's going on. Are you scared of her, or scared of her, anything like that? I mean,
Man, shut your bitch ass up.
Every time I see it, I'm call it out. This is the Mandela effect. When we grew up, these pizzas were circular, and it was toast Tino's with an S right here. It's missing. The whole S is gone, fam. You ain't telling me nothing. This is from another timeline. I'm not from here, bro. Using that phrase. White folks, don't do that. Black folks, DIA. Yeah, what do black people say? What's the black version of don't do that? White people say don't do that. Black people say DIA. D stands for don't. No. D stands for do.
Do it again.
Yeah, there you go. That first answer was crazy. Yeah, that first answer was crazy. My bad, bro. White folks, don't do that. Black folks, DIA.
Dick and ass?
Nah.
I don't know.
What can happen from all this? I've been around crazy women.
That happening in the future or, just in general?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she's sober, no, but I'm not being around her ever again. I'm packing my shit. We'll take you all coming around now. Pack my shit. You supposed to watch me for you. Doing everything I'm home all the time. That's his work. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So, you said, it's not the liquor store in there, the line, came back, y'all was all drinking, I guess, who was all drinking, me, your mom,
First,
the other brothers, or?
okay, so we came back from work and we got a couple beers, and that was when I drank, he gave me that first beer, and I went to home, yeah, and I went to got home, I don't know when Daniel got home, it was about 30 minutes before he got home, and I had that beer, and but before Daniel got home, we went out, and they got a big bottle of, there's a triple star, yeah, it's a pop, you know the old fashioned ones where you can I forgot what it's called. It's like instead of, metal attachment, and you can just pop the lid off. But, it was, I always had to tell you, it was about this big. It was a pretty good bottle. And, they drank me all the way home, and I'm not gonna lie to you, because obviously, I had like 2 or 3 shots of that too, but, when I got back home, yeah, Dennis was driving, Mom was in passenger, and I was in the back.
What dog?
That car right there. My car.
This little, yep,
And,
I think that,
I came back home, and, we started sitting in the living room, and, Mom had her music playing on the, record system, and, we were coming out of the room, and I go to the living room for a minute, and just sit down, and, they come in,
Bitch.
and, Mom went on the bed, and he's on the couch, or not on the couch, on the chair.
I'm losing?
Mom, and I'm like on the floor, and, I sit there for a minute, and, I started to doze off for a second, and, next thing I know, Mom's moaning, and you was on top.
you were in the living room.
I was in the living
I
room.
thought you told me you went to the bedroom.
No,
You were in the living room the entire time.
Yep, I was in there when it happened. I was watching the whole thing.
Well, you heard the moment or whatever.
I heard it for a good hour.
And
Until I didn't anything because I was scared. I didn't want him to jump up after me.
so when you got up, what did you say?
When I got up, I didn't, like when I went to go tell somebody,
Did you see them physically?
Oh yeah. My mom came through down and everything. I seen it all. Like everything. And I got up and I didn't look at him. I was just praying. I didn't see my brother or anything. I ran until I was right down the road.
You did mention you're saying you said it, and then you're saying you didn't see it. Right? So you're telling us you did see it, you seen everything, but then you're saying now that you didn't see your brother, you didn't see anybody. So you did see something, or you did not?
One time I didn't.
So when you got up, you didn't see anybody. You didn't see your brother.
No. When I got up, I didn't look at my mother. I didn't look at my mom. I seen what they were doing, but I didn't look at them to see if they were chasing after me. I just ran.
So you seen them in the act.
Yes.
You got up, you didn't look
Right.
at each other.
No. Like I was sitting there for a minute and I was looking at him and I got up for a second and he was just sitting there for a minute and I heard my mom still moaning and I acted like I was still asleep and I got up again and that's when I seen her pants down and everything.
Alright, so here's what I'm gonna do, okay? First of all, in the future, not to go to the top, put your hands on your back. Stop, put your hands back. You don't fight, you don't do this. I think he said that's good deal.
Worst thing I could do.
I get the circumstances, I understand you're upset, you're mad, whatever. That's right, you know. I'm gonna let you out, take steps off of it. I need a second, okay? And I told you really ever think about that. I need the best descriptive, detailed things you can give me, okay? On what this descriptive, like the best you knowledge that you've seen and what I need. But I need that, okay?
Okay, so I'm going through a lot right now. I'm not even gonna lie. How am I dad? I'm just dead right now.
For what's going on, I need the best descriptive, detailed text you can give me.
I'm scared right now.
And then you're
Hard to see that my mom.
Can you do that for me?
I'm not.
Can you give it time you have to type that?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay. Log out, if it's also good. And you can call it. I can see what's going on. I'm doing it out. Yeah. I'm outside to type it off on that. Be the next one. Alright. So I know we talked earlier, and you kind of talked to me about what got done.
Can you flip my hair back?
I was kind of right there.
What's up?
What got us caught out here? Like, what was going on?
Honestly, just a mutual agreement.
Mutual what?
Agreement?
Agreement?
Yeah.
On what?
Should have never been when it became.
Aren't you talking about a mutual agreement on what? What?
Agreement.
What's the thing?
My 19-year-old son now, instead of his 10 standard on the way. I'm trying to help him.
I get that, but what? You're talking about a mutual agreement. What are we talking about on that?
Taking care of his baby, not himself. Like,
What got us called out here? That's what I'm trying to figure out. I mean, you either know something or something, or you just stop talking.
I honestly just want the best for my grandchild.
You want the best for
I have kids, you know, I think it's over and sit down. I would never do anything to a child.
What was the diagnosis?
Cancer, that's what we're doing tomorrow.
So how is the stage 2 of the study?
Well, on November 31st, 2023, 911 operators received a highly unusual and disturbing phone call.
I just received a phone call from my husband. He said that our 87-year-old neighbor just came over and asked him to delete a browser that he had on his laptop. And when my He's outside. He just stopped him from burning the laptop. Talked to my husband. He just took the gasoline away from him. We'll get him on the way as soon as we can.
So he came over Tuesday and he asked me to look at his laptop. I said, okay. So what do you want me to do? And he said, I want you to delete some stuff. He had some stuff on it that I want on there, but I want it removed. So I'm like, okay, I'll just, because I want the whole program removed. And he said, okay. And then he said, well, I want to put it back on. And I'm like, well, what's the point of removing it? You know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, whatever. I got to go with my kid to school. So then the next morning, which was yesterday morning, he stopped me and he said, hey, could you look at my laptop again? And I said, yeah, no problem. I'll look at it. So I went over there and he had it open. I looked at it. And he goes, I want you to remove a chain storage. I'm like, okay. I saw his windows at room. One said top of the chain. I didn't click in it, but I saw the windows. There's like 6 windows. The next 2 were maybe Russian.
But you can see it, you still have off and on.
I saw the cat. That's the kid. Yeah. So I go, what do you want me to do? And he said, just delete it. I'm like, okay. He was standing there. I didn't know what to do at the time. But it was big. So I would have told him he wasn't standing there. He wasn't in front. But definitely the father was just trying out. And I'm like, and I said, I'm done. I just got mad. I just said, I'm going home. So I called his wife at work and told her about it. And she said, well, I'm going to come home now. I said, okay. So I guess she called him. He came back over here and wanted me to delete it. The whole thing. Because it's today, yeah. Then I said, I'm done. I'm not anything with this. And I let him have it. I yell at him a little bit. Not gonna lie. I have kids. You want my kids to come over and sit the other time? I said, don't do it. I'm not doing it. And then finally, he said, please do. So I called his wife, told her what happened. She was on her way home. And I was out here with her on the phone. And he had a dolly with this on it. And I said, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm going to burn the laptop. So he had the laptop with the lighter out back. And I said, no, you're not. And his wife started crying. She said, I'm trying to get you. So I said, okay, please go sit down. Please. So he goes, sat down. I went back in my house and I saw him walking along the side. So I ran out really fast. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm going to burn it. And I said, why? He said, I want to destroy it. And I'm like, okay. So I grabbed this and I ran over here. Called my wife. My wife said, we have to call him. It's over. I don't know. His wife came home. I was listening in. And she said, we were going to destroy it. I want to destroy it. It's going to be destroyed. I'm not going to keep it. And we're going to destroy it. So I'm going to take it to work. I don't really know what's going on. I wish I never saw it. I'm like, he's a granddaughter. She's 12.
Hello. Hey, how you doing? I'm Deputy who's the 5 County Sheriff's Office. How you guys doing today? What's going on today? Okay. Are you on any medication at all?
No, he's going to the doctor tomorrow.
Okay.
It's in the doctor.
Sorry. How did all this start today?
How did it all start today?
I had a computer and I had a program on it that I didn't want. So I asked him to get rid of it. He saw something and I don't know how.
Program. What kind of program?
It was, yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. It's another surgeon. I don't know either. It's just one.
What is
You thought it was okay to leave 6 kids here, all under the age of 10, by themselves,
And they're going farther and farther down.
just walking
No,
in the water. In the water by themselves.
all of them.
I think you need a lease for your kids, man. I don't like you to.
What is going on, guys? Today in this video. What is going on, guys?
I'm imagining a situation in which your sort of the things that make you tick are different from other people. And in fact, we can sort of talk about the idea of having mine in a moment, because I remember you were asked on this video that I talked about. Somebody, I think, in your chat or whatever, asked you what happens when one person's sort of base internal preferences conflict with another person. It's easy enough to say we're going to sort of enter into a transactional relationship where we share our food, you're going to benefit, I'm going to benefit, you know, it's all good. But if there's a situation in which you have a basic conflict, your interests versus somebody else's interests, what do you do when they contradict? And what you said at the time was a bad preference, and I'm quoting, a bad preference is one that demands other people to violate things to satisfy their own preferences, in my opinion. There's like an incompatibility there. But I don't think I have any internal preferences that contradict other people's so radically. Or if they do,
about 3 years ago, I fought off my insecurities about my appearance to finally invest in a camera to help me with my content creation. But within the past 2 to 3 years, I've tried to get more comfortable with myself. Everyone seems to be leaving down comments, constantly addressing my appearance, my looks, how old I am, my looks, both on YouTube and TikTok. It even led to the ban of my old TikTok account when I was finally getting some traction. To the point where I was kind of forced to take my learner's permit test to have some kind of ID to prove my age. And it even almost led to the indefinite ban of my second TikTok account. It's gotten so bad to the point where I felt like I had to make a video on it. For those that don't know me, and they knew, I'm Benel. I'm 18 years old. I was born on June 23rd, 2007. I just graduated high school. Since I was a kid, it's always really been my dream to be a content creator. I was going to make videos, but it gets super annoying when I constantly get these comments always addressing my looks. The last video that I posted, there was a dude that talked about how I look 30 years young or something like that, and it had 3 likes, and my video has 4. So I've been seeing this pattern since 20.
Shut the fuck up.
This video, I'm going to be doing. David Hamilton, aka Super Crib. This is talk about Super Crib, buddy. I got a story about Super Crib.
Coming to high school, I didn't know who Super Crib was. I didn't know nothing about. I was playing against him, and he was a big athletic dude, right? He going at it or whatever. Like he hit me hard, I hit him hard. I want to say like he put his elbow or something like that and was like, don't move it. I'm like, what? So I hit down and then we playing. So then after the game, coach was like, see, I like that. I like that. He's like, you didn't back down from Super Crib at all. I was like, oh. Oh my goodness. Who is Super? Like, this is dude, like, you know what I'm from? I'm like, no, with a name like Super Crib, I know what he's about. And then after that, the point that he came up was like, hey, I got respect for you. I was like, and they like jabbed me up and all that. And it's, but it's funny, so I had no clue. After that, we were cool.
So we played in the, he was my age, so he's 2 years older than you?
Yes, yes.
So we played in the Magic Johnson round ball game, and this dude got shot. I don't know if it was the day before, but maybe 2 days before?
A couple days before he got shot. I want to say it was like, this game was like a Friday or Saturday, and he got shot that Tuesday or Wednesday.
And played in the game?
Yeah.
Shot where though?
Yeah.
Leg?
He got shot in the leg.
Oh, man, no.
Hey, man, I'm still getting that.
But he was nice too. He went to Auburn for a minute. I just started following him on Instagram. I found him maybe a couple months ago and started following him. Yeah, I DM'd him real quick, but he didn't go about Super Crib. No, I don't think so. We in our 40s. Yeah, you might have let that rest.
May of 20.
See, the funny thing is, I feel like looks maxing what you do, you kind of like, it's like you kind of go to like one point where it's just the physique, but you don't go to like changing the face. Like, why would you like make that?
So either play C3 Sicilian or he plays the Java one.
Let's go.
Let's play our usually plays this stuff. Yeah, you can do this stuff.
94, yeah, I know this is
You can also play like Wall, but I don't know. 95, 94. People are like 95. Kind of an obscure line here. Like, I don't actually understand the point. If you play it on 95, Bishop C5, I'm just gonna go. Is literally tempo down. I don't think it's big talk to go down for a while. Caron, Caron, I'd like to so either like Caron, I'd like to so either plays the Sicilian or he plays the Chihuahua one. Let's go. Let's play it. Let's play our usually plays so it's something. Yeah, you can do this something.
Oh, that's so bad.
Yeah, it's Hikaru, of course.
Oh, that's actually terrible. I mean, I guess Daniel, awful pairing, but okay.
Luck in.
I mean, I have to. Okay, let's go with this. Let's do it. Is Daniel gonna play the elephant?
I think I played the elephant so many times. No.
All right, let's play something. I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna create a game. I'm gonna play G3.
Hopefully he doesn't go C5, which is in.
I want to fit some long thinking here.
Base probably will.
Okay, we're playing Hans. Good luck. Good luck to Hans. Let's focus. Let's see my best game. I should know him that. Surprise. Let's give him a run for his money. Okay, what are we playing? We're playing G6, of course. Yeah, I had a feeling he was going to do that. Yeah, now here, Queen A4, G6, here, Bishop G7.
Good morning, y'all.
Of him throughout his entire career. I've seen.
Why is he walking? Like he's walking?
It's crazy. What the heck is he doing?
This is walking, bro.
Entire career. I've seen
LeBron's my favorite player.
Do you find it ironic that many modern women complain about things like capitalism and climate change when most consumer spending is geared towards women?
Absolutely.
The tree used to leave dead animals in Mike Dishwasher.
I only did that. I only did that. Oh, that's the shit they got up there.
What was it?
It was a duck. Duck hunt with Greg Ostertag.
He used to take his truck all the time.
Oh yeah, Ostertag was crazy.
Yeah, he's a crazy dude, man. I was there
Yeah,
that
he's a wild crazy.
Yeah.
He's a wild card.
Ostertag was that.
But I chased Little Mike around the whole double court with the duck like Mike.
Nobody
Want to know what he did after that?
Yeah, what did Mike do?
His rebuttal. He years, took his diaper, peeled that shit off of me to handle. His knee at the time.
handle? He put shitty, his daughter.
And he's the biggest germ freak, so he had to grab the diaper from home and brought it as a rebuttal.
Mike don't let his food touch. So
No.
imagine what he had to
Big
go
germ
through to
problem.
carry his daughter's diaper and put it. Did you put your hand in the shit?
No, because obviously the guys were my guys.
Oh, so
told
he
me.
told you.
So we got the hose out before.
That's fucking nasty.
That's what I go, that's nastier than a duck fight.
What the hell?
I say that's another lie.
So the tree used to leave dead animals in the walkers?
I only
So what's your take? The camera is much stronger than a sword. The camera is the reason why I'm touring the world and meeting everyone, but in a very difficult way. It's like a good way that people know you for a good reason.
You got your.
He needs a special, man. He gets in those moments where, you know, you need a bucket. He always finds a way. You get to the end of the game, you just feel like he's going to hit the shot. It's kind of like playing with Melo in 2K12. Now you got in 2K26. Now with Melo. Come on, boy. I had to throw that out. Now, you went wrong.
think JB has a performance that had you speechless this season.
I feel like Washington was one of them. He had 50-something. But we played them on a back-to-back. So that was on the first night. He let it be known. That was one of them. But I remember when we closed out Detroit this year, game 6. Oh, we got some Detroit. Oh, you like that shot? We got the Detroit. That shot was crazy. That was like one of those moments where it's like, you know, when you see him do the crossover, you're like, you know he about to make it. So I was just waiting, seeing what Sully he was going to pull out with it. It was funny though because I laughed with him after the game because I said it's so funny that the game before I was hitting those shots. He comes back and he makes his game winner look way better than mine. And I'm like, God damn, Jay-Z, you could have me have one moment, one clutch moment, my New York Knicks moment. I make that shot in Detroit and we good, step back going right. Hell nah.
Gotta step up. No fucking way, bitch. Nobody knows me like you do. Nobody knows me.
A few years ago during a live stream, I spoke at length on the topic of why people differ in what they believe and how they act. The talk existed ever since on my main channel, but I did private or enlisted for a variety of reasons over the years. Surprisingly, every time I did so, I would receive emails and messages asking to gain access to it again. For example, I received this message today, which has inspired me to re-upload this video on my side channel, as I have deleted it from my... I would receive emails and messages asking to gain access to it again. For example, I was...
message today because it inspired me to re-upload this video on my side channel, but I have deleted it from my main channel. I won't waste your time speculating on why this talk resonated with people so much, but I will warn you it does start kind of slow. This talk was not pre-planned, and the question that instigated it was not well formed. Random question, but I was watching your old rambles on Sesame largely luck, and I have to ask, isn't that just a convenient way of evil to explain away their shortcomings? Use the example of when you found out that OBS could have multiple audio tracks working smart. I would argue that working smart in an instance isn't the act of using multiple audio tracks. If you're Googling OBS multiple audio tracks in the first place, you get what I mean. The people who work smart are the ones who actually seek answers to solutions. Okay. What you need before you can seek that information? You need information already that says that that information is something that exists and can be sought. Right now, there are infinite things that I do not know exist, and therefore cannot search for them because my environment hasn't offered me that information yet to enable me to have that bare amount of information to search for things. I have not been lucky in that respect. You ask a person who works in IT, what is the majority of IT work? It's like 80% Googling. But when you're an IT tech, you have enough information already to know what to Google. You've gone through the learning where a normal person can look at a problem on their screen and go, I have no fucking idea what to Google to solve this problem. They just don't know the terminology, they don't know the language, they don't even know if there's a solution that exists. You can only seek for things that are possible given the information that already exists in your environment, that you're just lucky to have. I understand what you're saying, but it's basically become paradox at this point. No, it's not. It absolves your responsibility for not searching for the answers. How so? How could you possibly ever be responsible for not searching for something that you have no ability to know even exists? How could that be your responsibility? You cannot possibly, at any given time, be simultaneously searching for literally every possible conceivable thing, irrespective of the likelihood of existing. That's literally impossible. The only time that you seek information is when you hit a problem or something in your environment offers information to you that is suggested that such a search would be fruitful. It would be a massive waste of time for you to just randomly search for things. I have no reason to believe that right now there is a way to turn Dettol hand sanitizer into gold. Nothing in my environment, nothing that I know of that suggests it's possible. So why would I search for it? This could be a thing that exists. There could be someone out there right now who knows of a way to turn hand sanitizer into gold, and he'd be like, look at this fucking dark back, not searching for that information. But then you can't have any expectation of me that I would search for this information. That's another thing. People can only work as smart as their environment allows. And some people's environments are more rich in terms of information, resources, niche knowledge that's only available to certain people that enable them to utilize their environments better than other people. And that's just luck, unfortunately. And there's no escape from this. Because you could randomly just strike out looking for information, hoping to stumble across something, but that is a very terrible way to go about looking for information. You'd be more often than not, in the overwhelming majority of cases, completely wasting your time. And that wouldn't be smart. Okay, I'll try a real-world example here. It happened just yesterday. I walked past a homeless person begging outside a cafe that had a staff wanted silent. In that scenario, is he merely a victim of his environment? How the hell would he get a job working at a cafe? What type of cafe is hiring a homeless person? Do you see what a homeless person looks like? There is not a clone of me, to some degree well-rested, access to resources, clean, high nutrition, who is homeless right now. People who are homeless aren't just a manifestation of a lack of desire to succeed. It's nonsense. You'll find that people born in particular environments, wealthy neighborhoods, or from wealthy families and stuff, whatever reason, don't end up homeless as often as people born into poverty. Crazy how that works. People are influenced by their environments and reach conclusions as to what is most likely a fruitful use of their time. A person who's homeless is not a person who's received positive affirmations from their environment suggesting that success is possible. And more than likely, they have more going on than simply a lack of job that has led to them being in those circumstances. Traditionally speaking, a homeless person is not in a good state of affairs. They are not one job at a coffee place away from doing well. The suggestion that laziness, a lack of desire for a job, like you're born lazy and not wanting a job, and then that just progresses to the point where you just never get a job and you just are homeless. That's just the dumbest way to look at the world. I could say to you right now, Here's the way of putting it. You can fly. Just go jump out the window. You can fly right now. Just jump out the window. You look at me and go, I can't fly. And no, I'm saying, man, you definitely can. 100%, if you just applied yourself, you can fly. But I have no evidence at all that my jumping out that window will do anything more than just causing me to fall, potentially to my death, if not injury. I'm saying, no, man, you can do it. I know all of your environments have suggested to you that this is a complete waste of your time that will only result in even worse circumstances for you, but just do it. Just do it, man. This is what you ask of some people. Some people are in that circumstance where their entire life or their environment in general is suggesting to them that certain actions are not a good use of their time. They will just lead to failure, won't actually improve anything. And some people will just sit there and go, just do it anyway. Just go for it. Even though they have no reason to believe that those actions will actually lead to significant benefit to their life. They say, just do it anyway, man. Just go. This is not how people work. People only perform actions that their environment suggests will be more likely to result in success in whatever they're pursuing. Why people who are born rich families or successful families or in rich areas or in wealthy countries surrounded by successful people, they look around and go, wow, success is possible. Success is possible for all those people. It's possible for me. I mean, this isn't the only reason these differences exist, but this is one of the reasons that they exist. Where people born in worse circumstances look around them and see people on welfare, people homeless, people failing in businesses, people who are malnourished, people who are on drugs, and saying to them, hey man, just, you can succeed. No one around you is succeeding. Sure, your entire environment suggests that what you're attempting to succeed in a monumental way in life would be similar to jumping out the window, do nothing more than cause you great significant harm, but do it anyway. People act as a response to their environment, and in ways that their environment suggests are a good use of their time. He is in the environment that demonstrates success in. How so? It isn't simply a matter of successful people existing, but that people like you can succeed. I personally do not think that there are many tools or mechanisms out there to help homeless people become affluent people. Well, I know from research that it's quite unlikely for there to be upward mobility from the very low stratas of society. To put it another way, if you're born into a circumstance of poverty, you are most likely going to end your life in poverty, as a rule of thumb. Like, let's say I became homeless tomorrow. Don't even know what tools I would use to get out of those circumstances, other than to use what I've already built because I was previously successful. If I lost all my money, I would rely upon my supportive family, you guys, these sorts of things that I only have because I've been born into a fortunate circumstance. Because 98% of the people walking past him are better off than him. Didn't they at least question why? Surely they question why. But a homeless person isn't like a person who is walking by them. These are not people with friends, social connections, access to technology, nutrition. People don't end up homeless who have an easy time succeeding in our society.
But what determines their environment at this point? Are you solely referring to their upbringing then?
And so environment is a catch-all term for everything. Then you are a pool of genetics that interacts with your environment. Your environment shapes your experience. You are a pool of genetics that interacts with an environment which creates experiences. And these experiences shape what you believe is possible or that you're likely to attempt to achieve. It's the greatest determining factor of your religion, the country that you're born in and the family that you're born into. So it's the most likely indicator of your level of affluence at the end of your life. The level of affluence that you're born into right at your birth. Why did no one, prior to the existence of the movie Back to the Future, have Back to the Future as their favorite movie? Because it wasn't in their environment yet. To use the example, so this person has existed in an environment that's had sufficient effects on them to get to a point where they're homeless. Affluence that you're born into right at your birth. Why did no one, prior to the existence of the movie Back to the Future, have Back to the Future as their favorite movie? It wasn't in their environment yet. To use the example, so this person has existed in an environment that's had sufficient effects on them to get to a point where they're homeless. So clearly there has been sufficient environmental variables to lead to this. You're just saying, just stop it. In the same way that I'm asking you to jump out a window despite no evidence that that's going to be a good use of your time. You're just saying, hey, I know that this, say, 30 years of life experience has led to this, but just stop doing that. Apply to a cafe, which, let's be real, is not likely to do your job. The suggestion that a homeless person has just never applied for a job, As if this homeless guy had just spent 30 years of his life to end up homeless. And he's like, man, have you ever thought of like just applying for a job? And the homeless guy's like, oh, what? I didn't think of this. What a genius idea. Whoa. Oh my God. Why did I just never consider this one? Like clearly this guy is going to be having more issues. Does the same environment absolve criminals then? Punishment of criminals, to me, isn't a manifestation of blame or hatred. It is attempting to avoid outcomes. If you have this entity, to say X, it doesn't matter why X is as they are. If they are going to kill a person, this is something that needs to be prevented. And so whatever mechanisms need to be applied there, that civilized society, should be done. Not with any sort of blame or hatred as to how this person ended up like this, but just because we don't want this to happen. It should be obvious that clearly endless variables outside of a person's control do influence a person to engage in violent crime, to be a criminal in any capacity. But that doesn't matter in terms of preventing the outcomes. A lot of people don't have this mindset. They have the mindset that you likely do. Like, oh, the criminal's just being criminal. Fucking criminals being criminal. They're just so bad. We need to get rid of them. They're responsible for their criminality. Fuck them. This sort of viewpoint has no basis in psychology. It's just nonsense. It's just simplifying the world and simplifying people in a way that's not possible given what we know of humans right now. The viewpoint you're expressing, what I'm trying to say is, has no basis in any modern understanding of how humans become human, why humans act as they do. As weird as it is sometimes to think, human doesn't have limitless possible behaviors that they're going to commit at any given time. It's like this big. I am not suddenly going to jump up and move to Mexico. But there are people out there who would.
Considering you are as ingrained in philosophy as you are, your argument highlights significant shortcomings in your knowledge of the real world. Given your job, this doesn't surprise me.
I spent 4 years studying why people act as they do. All my electives were in criminal. I'm not suddenly going to jump up and move to Mexico. But there are people out there who would.
Considering you are as ingrained in philosophy as you are, your argument highlights significant shortcomings in your knowledge of the real world. Given your job, this doesn't surprise me.
I spent 4 years studying why people act as they do. All my electives were in criminal, as a matter of fact, as well. Even before that, I was doing community services. Specifically avoided philosophy in terms of determinism and stuff. But this is how humans function. And I even explained it to you using examples that should clearly apply to you. Like, in the same way that you wouldn't jump out a window because everything in your environment suggests that is a bad move for you, some people will not act in ways that you think are advantageous because they believe the exact same thing. They believe that be a complete waste of their time and effort. And you should recognize this, that even if you personally believe that a person would benefit from a particular action, it doesn't mean that they agree or that they have sufficient motivating factors in their environment to engage in that behavior. As I tried to explain to you, your surface assessment of a person as merely being homeless because of their lack of initiative is just wrong. It has no basis in any understanding of humans and how they behave as they do. The window example is so hyperbolic that it's a total falsehood. No, it's a perfectly applicable analogy. The analogous thing is that your environment has suggested that a particular action is completely irresponsible. And we don't have to do that. Like I exist in an environment where I believe that it's a complete non-starter that's in their things. While another person exists in another environment that it's a perfectly acceptable thing to be. I believe that jumping out a window is equally a sensible action as investing in NFTs. Other people completely disagree with that. So where does this difference between two people come from? We can go back one step. Using your example, why isn't that person applying themselves to get that job? So we got one homeless person who sees that help wanted and says, I'm interested. There's another homeless person who says, oh, there's help wanted? Hell yeah, I'm going to apply for that job. What has caused the difference between these two people? So there's only two possible explanations here. It's genetic, which neither of these people chose. So there are aspects of genetics that relate to energy and positive attitudes and even your politics and stuff. There are factors that influence how likely you are to be assertive and outgoing and apply yourself and whatnot. Or it can be environmental factors. This person applies for a bajillion jobs and fails. This person hasn't done that yet. And this isn't this person's fault. This person has received things in their environment. Like they apply for a job, the person says, oh, you're almost there, but you're just not ready. That's going to give them initiative to try again and try again and try again. But just some people try chance the environment are going to receive nothing but negative reinforcement. Nothing but. Everything they do will fail. Their situation will get from worse to worse to worse to worse to worse. Usually people who exist in bad circumstances already. To just say, why doesn't this person just go for this job? Why don't they? This belief in humans having limitless wishes or drive doesn't exist. All humans have a finite amount that they're willing to pursue anything. So it's always, naturally, just by the chance of environment, there'll be some people who have reached their limit. Most successful people have situations where they get positive reinforcement, especially early on. Initial positive reinforcement, suggestions that the action being done more will result in success are those who are most likely to succeed. If you do X and it fails, and X again and fails, X again, there is no one in existence, no one, who will do X forever without any positive reinforcement. It just doesn't exist. Doesn't this only apply if you take the trading of thought that who you are affects your choices rather than your choices affect who you are? At what point do you become responsible for your own bad decisions? What are you? Each of us is merely a conjunction of genetics and environment that leads to experiences that naturally follow from each other. Your decisions are merely a manifestation of your environment. To simplify reality and say, if I was born in the 12th century, I wouldn't have pursued my career. If I was born with an inability to speak, wouldn't have pursued this career. If I had been born, even to a place in Australia without access to the internet, I wouldn't have pursued this career. You keep bringing this back to this idea of responsibility. I reject the framing. I don't care about responsibility. I only care about outcomes. To what degree people are responsible doesn't matter to me. All I care about is why did it happen? Is it good or bad? If it's bad, how do we stop it and make it better? The idea of responsibility comes up in certain ideas of politics and philosophy that largely exist just to assign blame so that you can justify a person being as they are. It's a part of the just world bias, where everyone wants to have a narrative to explain how people in bad circumstances are deserving of those bad circumstances because they're responsible for them. It's hard to justify either from psychology or philosophy. It's not useful. It's not practical. It has no reason to be.
You've just spent 10 minutes justifying why people are as they are, just from the opposite perspective.
You're using justification in the sense that to mean acceptable or okay, that's not what I'm doing. It's meaning why. Anything that happens has a cause for it being there, and a hypothetical solution. It is a simple fact of reality that who you are was not your choice. I'm sorry. You, as an entity, at any given time, bombarded with literally endless bits of stimuli and variables that you have absolutely no control over. And your response to this set of variables is dependent upon the last set of variables that hit you, and the previous ones before that, and the previous ones before that. And this will happen until you die. I can't force the air to leave, or I can't will my government to change, or something. Is that what you would tell your kids, and you expect them to be driven and motivated? My God, reality can be discomforting. My desires for what I want reality to be, or what I wish was lovely and happy to tell my kids, has nothing fucking to do with what reality actually is. You can quantify variables, obvious variables, that are determining factors in your likelihood of success in anything. You can do a regression analysis and you can explain the difference between people based on where they were born, their levels of nutrition, their levels of education, all this jazz. And these things you don't control. My level of work ethic is not something that I woke up and chose. It is a manifestation of my genetics combined with my particular environment. There are certainly experiences that I could have had where I wouldn't be this person now. You could tweak my genetics and I wouldn't be this person now. I am fortunate to have been in the circumstances that I found myself in. You can certainly increase your likelihood of success, no? Sure. At any given time, you as an entity have a bunch of experiences, knowledge and stuff like that, that you can apply to any circumstance that you're in. And it can be the case you have something in here that can work with the environment that exists around you to increase your success. But sometimes that's not the case, and you're just fucked. Like a person born in a mud hut with no access to education, medicine, existing 1,000 miles away from civilization, isn't going to become a billionaire. They're just not. They do not have the necessary knowledge to apply to their environment, even if their environment actually is one that where success is possible.
But you are in the circumstances you're in. The water battery about why is totally irrelevant once you're already in that position. Your argument only stands if someone never becomes self-aware.
Even if you are in a circumstance where you believe success is possible, it doesn't mean that you actually have the tools for success. Even if you are in an environment that imbues within you a belief that success is possible, doesn't mean you have the tools to succeed in your environment. That you have the knowledge of what to pursue, where to look for information. There has to be something in your environment already that is at least a stepping stone for you to go, oh, these steps lead somewhere. And you've also got to have the right variables in your environment or your genetics or whatever to believe that stepping up these steps is worthwhile, or got to have the energy for it, or whatever. No, but once you know it's possible, you can at least begin to pursue that. Sure. So here we go. Here is the desert. You are here. I can tell you with a certainty that going in one of these directions will be success, and the other three are certain. Or your genetics or whatever, to believe that stepping up these steps is worthwhile, or got to have the energy for it, or whatever. No, but once you know it's possible, you can at least begin to pursue that. Sure. So here we go. Here is the desert. You are here. I can tell you with a certainty that going in one of these directions will be success, and the other three are certain death. And you can only pick one direction. Where do you go? I personally don't move. Why would I have risk a 75% chance of death? Fun fact, I lied. You die in every case. Success is staying put. What I mean is, knowledge that success is possible doesn't suggest that you can succeed. But until you actually succeed, you don't actually know that you can succeed. You can only have an approximate knowledge of that being possible. Success, as weird as it is ultimately trying to predict the future given your present variables. You're here, and there are endless possible things you can do. Sit on the couch, pick up your phone, you can type any number you want. Millions upon millions of things that you can do. And some of them will potentially result in your success. Picking these at random chance would be a fool's errand. It'd be a complete waste of fucking time. You'd only pursue it if you had a good belief as to a certain avenue of success that you can do and you can succeed. To have this, you need the variables Y, Z, whatever, that says, hey, yo, here's a path. Your family are bankers, and they say, oh, we've got banking connections, or go to a school, a teacher's like, oh, you seem to got some aptitude for art there, my friend. You might want to pursue that. Something in your environment that suggests, hey, yo, you can succeed if you do these things. And without these, you won't do anything. You have no reason to believe that even if this success is possible, you have no idea where to go. If you pursue here and fail, it's going to put you in a worse circumstance than you were before. If you pursue here, you can't pursue here. So everything has an opportunity cost. Time is finite. It doesn't matter who you are. If you pursue here and don't succeed, you pursue here and don't succeed, you pursue here and don't succeed, everyone has a limit. And that limit depends on variables in your environment. So if you've got a supporting family who are like, oh, you failed, but don't worry, buddy, you get them next time. You got a wife, a girlfriend, maybe you didn't succeed, but you were very close that time. Or you got a lot of positive feedback even if you ultimately failed in your pursuit or something that can spur you on. But eventually, you're going to quit. Either you are going to quit or you're going to be literally incapable due to death or injury or whatever for pursuing another avenue. And these people, we call homeless people. So there are two types of people who end up homeless. Either those who are effectively born homeless, they're just there, and their avenues of escape are effectively none, or people who their environment ultimately leads to those conclusions. No one wakes up and says, I want to be homeless today, right? Homelessness is a long path, depending upon where you start. No one just willingly walks that path. No rich person wakes up, at least just mentally stable and thinks, you know what, I'm tired of being rich. I'm tired of being born to affluence. I'm tired of going to the best schools and eating the best food and not being malnourished and whatever. I'm going to be homeless today. Homelessness isn't a choice. You can absolutely say homelessness is a mindset. It's true. The mindset is forced upon you by your environment. It's not something you wake up and choose. Because when you see a homeless person next to a help wanted sign, asking the question, why would he or she stay in those circumstances? Answer would never be because they want to be homeless. If you walked up to a homeless person and gave them sufficient money to get an apartment or something, they probably would. If you wanted to make it your life's goal to help a homeless person, you probably could do that. If you just had limitless resources, if you could convince them that you're going to help them, you probably get them somewhere. Some you couldn't because there would be other barriers that you personally wouldn't have the knowledge to solve, in mental illness or other forms of illness, physical stuff. For a significant amount of homeless people, the difference of their homelessness would be a bit of information that you or I might have, just a little bit of money or a little bit of cash, and it's just never going to come, which is very sad. I didn't work for my supportive family. I didn't work to be born in one of the most prosperous countries in the world. It's life. Life is unfair. I just can't agree with your framework. Advocating responsibility for one's actions isn't a common ground I can begin with you on. Sure. So the reason for this is because applying responsibility is a useful idea for you to simplify the world. A person ending up as they are is a very complex process of understanding behaviors and forces and environments and different variables and whatnot and how experience relates to environments. But if you can just say they are as they are because they're fault, you're done. It is a very simple philosophy, a toxic philosophy that makes society so much worse. That you're done. You are now done. It doesn't ultimately matter why, because they are responsible. They're fault. If they're in bad circumstances, they're responsible for them. If a person is in good circumstances, they are also responsible for them. This worldview rejects things like taxes or public funding or good works and stuff, because this good person deserves their good circumstances because they're responsible for them. And this bad person deserves their bad circumstances because they're responsible for them. Any action to help this person is really an act of mercy as opposed to an understanding of the imbalances of society and existence as a whole. The reason why, when challenged here, you said, how could you tell your kids that? Everything I've talked about, the reason why you reject it isn't because it doesn't have a basis in evidence or that the way you view the world better explains reality. It is because my worldview would not enable you to do this. Your world will become much more complicated. And you just don't want to go to the mental level. But at some point, they have to be responsible. But why? Why? Why at some point do they have to be responsible? And a child is behaving badly, their parents are responsible. Why? A child's genetics influence how likely they are to misbehave, as to the environment that they're in. A parent is more or less equipped to deal with an unruly child based upon the experiences they have within their environment and their own genetics as well. Can they afford a babysitter? Can they afford correct nutrition? Have their parents themselves been good at their job, teaching how to raise? People don't wake up and choose to not be able to handle an unruly child. It is an aspect of their environment as being imbued within them.
We will never agree with this differing framework.
You'll notice that you aren't refuting anything I'm saying. You're not arguing. You're merely saying, this cannot be. This is incompatible with what I want reality to be, therefore it must be false. When I gave you just now a dozen reasons why people differ in terms of their ability to handle unruly children, you can't say, no, that's not true, because it is true. Because you're framing it in a way that makes it irrefutable, because it's true. We have one set of parents that are able to handle. You can't say, no, that's not true, because it is true. Because you're framing it in a way that makes it irrefutable, because it's true. So we have two people. We have one set of parents that are able to handle unruly children, and other people who are not able to handle unruly children. Didn't just wake up one morning and go, I don't want to be able to handle an unruly child. There is reasons for why this difference exists. These differences can either be genetic, which they did not choose, or they can be manifestations of their environments and the experiences that they have within them. Is merely a combination of their genetics and their environment. If there was a very supportive father here, who's like, who takes them under their wing and says, oh, look, this is how you handle an unruly child, they would be able to handle an unruly child. If a person said, oh, you're having trouble with your child, well, actually, I was too, and here are the tools that I used to solve that. This person isn't here, not here. This doesn't make these people better people. It doesn't make them responsible. It doesn't make them better people. It just means that this aspect of the environment is different. The nature versus nurture debate is not one where it's either or. It's a question of how much in any different thing. So X can be 75% nature, 25% nurture in general, and Y can be the complete opposite, right? It is both, and it's obviously both. It's just a question of how much.
These are unanswerable questions, mate.
What do you mean they're unanswerable? They're analogies. Saying that you wouldn't jump out the window because nothing in your environment is suggestive that would be a good action for you isn't a thing that needs to be answered. It's just a statement of fact.
In the nicest way possible, this feels very Dunning-Kruger.
What do you think Dunning-Kruger is? This is literally the thing that I studied for like 4 years. I can be wrong. It's Clearly, I possess knowledge of this topic. I wouldn't have been able to speak on it for fucking 50 minutes. I couldn't have graduated if I didn't have knowledge on this topic.
Talking about psychology like it's an absolute.
I'm not talking about psychology like it's an absolute. Anything that exists can only be believed to varying degrees of confidence based on what is currently known or suggested by the evidence that exists. There's no position I hold on anything that I would consider to be without question. Every time I offer you problems, you say, this cannot be, and that's it. You've just been incredulous. There must be a point where there is responsibility. There must be. What will you tell your children? These aren't statements of a person looking for the truth. It is, there must be a way to confirm what I want to be true. There'd be a nice world where everyone, whatever circumstances they're in, were deserving of those circumstances. That's just probably out there.
No. Only from me. What makes a photo meme worthy?
I saw this viral post on Twitter that many people have done before, but this one like 60,000 likes or whatever, and I had an idea. So I duplicated it, delete one YouTuber forever, which is how they type it. And then I put 4 stupid pictures of myself. Any chance I get to use these kind of stupid pictures, I take it. I think I can use this one as well before. I just love it. I've actually gone back through my images quickly on my PC, and I go all of them and scroll through them quickly to find any pictures of me that are potentially funny from the past, whatever. Like, I still have access to me. I could just take funny pictures of me, but I think pictures that are like almost unintentionally funny work the best, you know? Or like, they're not staged ones, these are naturally how I was looking at the time. This why I like, obviously, it's like push my hair up and stuff, but like, it captures an essence of humor that I really like. Yeah, the reason I skipped half by 8 years. Yeah, part of my comedy is making fun of myself. I'm looking pretty good these days. So I need to go back. I was less kind about the way I look. Not that I don't have funny, weird facial expressions these days. I can remember back in high school, I was told multiple times that I had a very expressive face. And it was just like, you know, a thing to file away, little information. Turned out to end up helping me in my career. So, the past this episode's going well, view-wise. Yesterday I was sitting back, and I was thinking to myself, I haven't been really hyped for a show in years. But it's not just that. It's that it's been a long time since I've had that community feel around a show, like a collective hype. I wrote this on Twitter. Better Call Saul was the last show I was hyped about, where it felt like everyone on social media was watching it with me. That was over 3 years ago. I hope to get to experience that again. It feels harder for shows to have that sort of universal presence and appeal. Am I right? I got a lot of comments on this of people like just mentioning various shows like Andor and stuff. I watched season 1 of Andor. I thought it was really good. I watched season 2 of Andor. I was like, kind of less interested in this now. Like people mentioned like Severance and stuff. Severance did not get anywhere near the kind of attention that Better Call Saul got, or Breaking Bad got in its later seasons, or Game of Thrones, for example. Even when Game of Thrones was at its peak, and just like people having parties to watch Game of Thrones, like there are shows with hype. There are shows that get popular that just doesn't seem to have that sort of universal interest, And it's kind of what I'm looking for. Like I'm watching Peaky Blinders with my missus right now. It's a good show. Still enjoying it. We're up to the latest seasons. What is season 5, I think now? It's like 6 seasons back, right? But no one else is really watching it with us. And there's no one really to talk about it with. And there's no one making like funny edits about Peaky Blinders. And there's no one making funny edits about Severance and stuff. People discussing fan theories and stuff. But like all the Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul memes that still exist today and get posted today are funny. I like that stuff. Squid Game, does Squid Game season 3 now have that sort of universal attention? Like I know Squid Game season 1 had that. I think it's the same, right? But again, a part of it might just be me. Like you don't need universal social media presence to enjoy something, right? Like I'm enjoying Peaky Blinders, right? I can enjoy watching other shows. It's just, I thought it was kind of cool when that sort of stuff happened. And I recognize that, like, hey, maybe I could just jumped in on Severance when it was earlier and just been involved in a smaller community, whatever. This isn't me being like, my life sucks, boo-hoo. I was just making an observation that I had not experienced this in a few years, and I hope to experience it in the future at some point. But as I say, there's just so much more competition, people's attention these days. And unless something is like an already established brand, it seems like it has a harder time breaking through and touching enough people. This is section. So that's what I was going with. You guys know about Chip, the guy who went viral on TikTok recently? None of this is crazy. To put it in perspective, it went more viral than my laughing at my eye. What does he do? It's okay. I'll show you. There are 150,000 posts with under hashtag Chip, and it's from this guy, Ren Shaw J. It's got 25 million views.
Is there a black person
2.7 million likes. This one went very viral as well. Do it, lady. Do it, lady. It just goes to show, right, that the internet is just so large that some things can go really viral, and the vast majority of people, even in the right age demographics, will never hear that. What is it? It's a comedy sketch thing. It's a character that he plays called Chip, who has weird characteristics and looks kind of weird, and he's in an office environment, and there's skits that are played fully serious, where he's a character, and it's funny, right? It's funny because the guy who plays him, Chip is represented as like a nerdy guy, right? But the guy who plays him is a very conventionally attractive dude with like a six-pack. But you wouldn't realize it seeing his character. So I watched a lot. No, I knew of him before he went viral, but I was just like, oh, this is pretty funny. Oh, dude. Have you guys heard about these dudes? They have also gone viral. They're called Drew Key 5000. What was the most viral one? Was it this one? So the concept of it is they're taking modern, like rap and hip hop and stuff.
Hoppity.
They're writing it and putting music to it to make it sound like it's what in the 20s. Walk it like I'm talking, walk it like I'm talking, walk it like I'm talking, walk it like I'm talking. It is ridiculously catchy to the degree that for hours yesterday, I had one of these stuck in my head, and I believe it was one of the lesser known ones. I think well, relatively speaking, the one that went viral for has almost 50 million views, but I think it was this one. I'm in my black friend, doing cocaine with my black friend. It's once you hear it, once you listen to some of these, it will be stuck in your head. One very funny thing though that happened. Again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before about things can go viral in particular places and everyone else not know anything about them. Is what's this dude's name again? Aiden Ross, yeah. So Aiden Ross took these dudes out to a boxing event and got them to sing at it. And no one had any idea who they were. I've seen some small videos of it, and it was super quick. It's just like, I mean, if I was in there, well, I don't mean like anything else, for obvious reasons, but like, imagine you blog viral and this guy's like, hey, here's a fuck ton of money to go and perform live. But yeah, why not give us some money, I suppose. But yeah, I like this stuff. When they bring out a new one, I listen to it. I think the gimmick will get old after a while, but it is pretty interesting that they found success doing it. As I say, if you want to get, if there's any monumental success in social media, you kind of need to be doing something that people have never seen before. That's of interest. Isn't it the 1920s, guys? This is the 1920s. Meta is like a Facebook boomer showing us things that make him laugh. But this is popular among the kids, guys. It's 50s, 50s, yeah, or 20s to 40s, 50s. I know it's old. It's old. I'm even following them, guys. I don't follow no one. You guys know about Chip? As it has changed over the years, I don't talk about politics anymore. Don't talk about any other creators anymore. I engage less on social media. My social media is traditionally just my own jokes. This is all with the So I have malware bias, and I didn't used to keep it on my PC at all. So I posted this without any context, and I want to give some. I say here on Twitter, I struggled with positive/negative misconceptions of me, worsening when drifters began lying about me for engagement, leading to comically distorted views. But I've slowly accepted this as a part of my job, finding comfort in the esteem of those who know me and ignoring those who don't. This post
Free will determinism debate.
Charles, I want to compare notes.
Okay.
On free will.
One of my favorite things to do. Here's my thing. It is true that at some level of resolution we can observe, causality is absolutely true. Given these initial conditions, this is what will happen afterwards.
That's the physicist.
That's physically speaking. So if you take it to its logical conclusion, then there is no free will because everything is predetermined
by things that
Everything has an antecedent.
whether you know it or not, something is causing it to happen.
Something precipitated the thing that caused the thing that made
It's
that
always
happen.
going to happen. But there is also stochastic uncertainty in the universe. It's built in. There's randomness, there's unpredictability. Yeah. And so you have to ask, I think, if you're a physicist, what level of chaos actually affects you to the extent that you could actually make an instantaneous decision based on other stuff that's not necessarily in your past experiences or what you have just seen in your current environment.
All right, but wouldn't all those past experiences and your current environment, despite the fact that if you're introducing an element of chaos so that you've never experienced this ever before, your experiences that you have had would then inform your decision about the thing that you've never experienced.
Inform is the word.
Oh,
is it
rather
inform
than
or dictate?
predicate.
Right.
Oh.
Require. Right. That's the thing. Yeah. Let's say you're in a room with a whole bunch of audience members. You tell a joke. Right. It falls flat. In that moment, you have many things you could do to turn it into a laugh point. True. Right. You hear silence. You'd be like, "Oh, that was good," and everyone laughs. So, so it makes
So this is my gun.
Yeah, right. What do? Do you have the freedom to choose one of several choices that you had designed from your past, that you prepared to deal with that eventuality? Or is the choice made for you already?
But if he was less experienced, he might not dig out of that hole as effectively or efficiently.
Exactly.
But if you've been in 100 cases where you have Joe Bond, you have data on how to pull out of it. So statistically, you have a chance of getting
And it
smart.
happens instantaneously.
You
don't even realize that it's happening.
It's in the mouth.
Like, yeah. Right. You just see Milton, though. See, that's right. So now that would be interesting because here you are in a place where your instinct.
Guys, it's Cosmic Skeptic, and I'm sure that many of you are, like me, currently feeling pretty down and upset about being quarantined and unable to leave the house and meet friends, thinking back to a time when you were free and able to live your life as you please without constraints.
So I thought I'd take a moment to dispel this notion by reminding you that you were never in fact free in the first place, that free will does not exist, and that the constraints placed upon your freedom by the coronavirus pale in comparison to the constraints placed upon it by your own brain. You know, come to think of it, that argument against
Well, so then Geppetto shows up, and he's a kindly old guy, which is pretty much exactly what you'd expect. And, you know, he's a careful craftsman, and he likes kittens, and, you know, that's always a good thing. And he has some fish, and, you know, he's good at making things, and he's got a sense of humor, and he's kind of playful, and so he's the good father, fundamentally. He's the wise king. He's the positive archetype of the masculine. And that's what he is. So he's culture in its positive manifestation, and he gives rise to this creation, which is his puppet, which is what culture does, because you're a puppet of your culture. You're a marionette of your culture. And so maybe you could be more than that.
Display.com/Destiny Official. Look at those guys. Look at all these metal posters we can get. Look at how cool this is. Wow. They look great in real life. We looked at them on screen. Okay? When you buy these posters, you use Destiny 15, you get a 15% discount. I actually really like these posters. I was really, really close to buying one anyway. The only reason I didn't was because I was about to pull the trigger on it, but I was just going on one of my infamous vacations. But yeah, these are really cool. They're pretty heavy. They give like sticks or whatever, or stickers to like stick to the wall and stuff. They look really cool in real life. This is a metal poster. Look at how vibrant the colors are. Look at how. Yeah. You know, solid. That's not breaking. It's not breaking. It's not bending. It's cool as fuck, okay? Fucking buy this shit. Holy shit. Hey, what's up?
Hi, what's going on? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm doing fine.
I'm okay. I was showing people my hat and my wig for something in the future. I don't really know what to talk about. It's like, oh,
Okay, what conversation do you want to do? Yeah.
do you want to talk about like egoism in general?
Yeah, if that's what you want to do. Go for it.
Okay. I don't like go for it. I'm like not sure what to say exactly.
I'll literally talk about anything you want to talk. So when I say go for it, I mean like it's not like there's no problem.
Okay. I'm okay. Let me open up my OneNote just in case. I don't have any notes written down for this one, but I just in case I want to write them down, you know?
Okay.
So like earlier I asked you what your egoism ew. So you think wanting things do you think it's inherently selfish?
Yeah, I think so.
This is a kind of strange question, but why is selfish?
MP was great.
I mean, I guess it's a little bit, it's a bit of a tautology. Like, it's, I guess that's by definition, if you want something, it's something that you want. Like, desire.
So, like, with wanting things, I mean, what are you supposed to do? Selfish.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Although I guess it depends on how we get into, like, defining selfish. Selfish is a pretty morally loaded word or whatever, I guess, or it can be.
Okay, then let's try to define selfish, right? Because, like, for me, whenever I think about, like, selfishness, or if somebody's selfish or not, I think, like, that they're putting their needs above somebody's others, they're putting their needs above, their wants above somebody else's needs, without being in consideration the other person, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'd say that's, like, the general definition of selfish. Is usually when people say it, they say, like, you're doing it at the expense of somebody else, or at the expense of some obligation. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, with this definition, would you consider like a person who wants like water or food selfish still, or not really?
Under that definition, no, I wouldn't. With reasonable assumptions, assuming you're not like stealing food from a kid or something like that that's starving. Yeah, of course.
Okay. So let me get something straight about how is right? Yeah. So for you, egoism is all about like everybody's technically doing something for their own benefit, right?
Yeah, or the things stem from people's desires. I like that descriptive position because it seems to give me a good understanding of how people function. That if you can make people want something, that they'll do something, or that people do something because they want to do things, rather than those desires are stemming from some immaterial plane or from some other unanalyzable system. I don't know what some other system I can't analyze.
Okay, but maybe I'm just having a problem with egoism. I have like beef with the idea that that desire is inherently selfish, you know?
Sure.
So the whole thing is like, yeah. So with egoism, at least like it's I don't say it's insignification, but its connotation, right? Is that like people are inherently selfish beings. However, I don't think a want is inherently selfish. They're really doing something at the expense of somebody else by just wanting something, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I guess like, I think
If you type, "Do I have free will?" into YouTube, you'll be confronted by a wall of videos telling you the answer is no. Judging by this, you'd be forgiven for thinking the matter is settled. But in 2020, when a survey asked thousands of academic philosophers what they thought, only 11.2% thought we didn't have free will. So I thought I'd put out my own video on YouTube making the case for having free will to balance the scales a little bit. Now, to do this properly, I'm going to need to look at related topics too, like causation, natural laws, determinism, and so forth. And I'm also going to need to put forward my own positive theory of free will to help me make my case and to tie this argument in with a great YouTube conversation. I thought I'd argue by critiquing the views of the popular Alex O'Connor, aka Cosmic Skeptic. About 7 years ago, O'Connor released a video arguing we don't have free will. A few years later, he revisited the topic, and then recently he had an argument about free will with Ben Shapiro. Right. Let's go.
Standardly, there are two conceptions of free will philosophers use. Number one, the could have done otherwise conception, and number two, the sorcered conception. Under the could have done otherwise conception, what's relevant to free will is the possibility of having done something other than you did. So if you did something freely, then you could have done something else instead. If you couldn't have done something else instead, then you weren't acting freely. Under the sorcered conception, what's important is that the source of your actions is something we could call you or yours. Perhaps you couldn't have done otherwise, but that doesn't matter as long as the source of your action comes from yourself. To see that these two conceptions are different, consider
If I sat here before you and I opened a bottle of water, imagine what it would be like if someone told you that this bottle of water didn't exist. He would tell you that it is just a figment of your imagination. So likewise, if I were to drop some poison into this water, he would tell you that it cannot harm you because it does not exist. Would you drink the water? Would you refuse to take a drink but then still try to argue that, yes, the bottle is a figment of your imagination despite the fact that we can both see it? Unless you spend too much time online, these may seem like ridiculous questions. But unfortunately, there is a parallel to this in philosophy in which some people consider this a genuine debate. The question of free will. Now, if you're a reasonable person, you may ask yourself, what question of free will? I make choices every day. I clearly have free will. And I would agree with you. But as we're going to cover here, there is a very loud and very confident minority that, as per our analogy, would tell you that this bottle of water doesn't exist, and that your experiences of your own free will are just an illusion. There are those who reject free will, and generally these people are going to be called determinists. They believe that all of the choices we make are predetermined by external causes. And I think many of us have an inclination to one degree or another that this is false, but I think we forget just how dangerous this ideology actually is. And I don't just mean something like the lack of drive that one may experience from having a lack of self-determination. As an extension of debunked schools of thought like positivism, determinism can be said to be at the core of many of humanity's worst social beliefs. But I think that's a video for another day because we already have enough on our hands with answering the simple question, why is determinism wrong? Well, first to answer that, I think it's helpful to understand what I mean by determinism, because there are technically different kinds. In discussions of free will, terms like determinism, indeterminism, libertarianism, compatibilism, and incompatibilism will often pop up. While it would be difficult to comprehensively outline all of the competing beliefs and overlap between these ideologies, the simplest model to represent this argument is the scale from so-called hard determinism to strong free will. On this scale, a belief like compatibilism can be considered a form of determinism, because compatibilism simply refers to a group of beliefs in which free will and determinism are compatible. Generally, this is someone who believes in some variant of a deterministic world, that is to say that our choices are either greatly influenced or caused by external factors, or that person also believes that people have some moral agency such that they can be held accountable for their actions. Regardless of what you believe, however, if you think that people have some agency or that deterministic principles have some wiggle room, you would likely be classified as a soft determinist. Soft determinism has some truth to it. Obviously, we live in a world where our environment clearly has some effect on us, and we live in a world that is mostly governed by deterministic principles like physical causality. And as such, the question of how much these principles govern our universe is a matter of honest and intellectual inquiry, as the debate between soft determinism and free will is still very much ongoing. So this video is not targeted at anyone who is a soft determinist, or anyone doesn't subscribe to the most extreme forms of free will. When I say determinism is a flawed ideology, I am talking about hard-line determinists, or at least that's what I will be talking about for the majority of this video. While this is by no means an official classification, I think we can generally split free will deniers into three groups. I'm just going to call these groups true determinists, pedantic determinists, and edgy teens. I'm off to a good start, huh? Not making anyone mad with this video. Let's start with the only group that I'm not really even sure classifies as a determinist. These are people who make arguments about necessary ability. They claim that free will cannot exist because our ability to act does not enable us to act freely, and as such, our will is limited. For example, if you wanted to choose to stand up and levitate, you could not because you cannot levitate. You do not have free choice, or at least so they would say. I'm not going to spend too long on this group because, as the name should imply, I don't think that this is a position that I really need to refute for anyone who has made it out of of their teenage years and gained the intellectual maturity to realize that just blatantly and intentionally misrepresenting someone's position is not an intelligent argument that needs to be addressed. Free will is free will, not free ability. Ability and will are not the same thing. So the mild restriction of ability does not imply the complete restriction of will. This position just seems to be predicated on not understanding the concept of choice, which is frankly a trend in most determinist positions, so let's quickly cover that. Oxford defines free will as the power of acting without the constraint of necessity or fate, the ability to act at one's own discretion, which is where some people point out without the constraint of necessity. But Oxford defines necessity as the fact of being required or indispensable, and defines required as officially compulsory or otherwise considered essential. Indispensable. This must mean that either the original definition can be interpreted as the power of acting without the constraint of being compelled, which obviously does not defy the argument of necessity as some make it, or here at best it would mean without the constraint of that which is essential or indispensable, which also doesn't really fit the argument. And also, even if this was not the implication of this definition, it's also likely just the case that since this is a dictionary, it is using a very colloquial definition of free will. If I give you the option of do what I say or die, you can say that I didn't really give you a choice, but technically I did. This phrase that you have no choice or no free will in these instances, that's just hyperbolic. For example, Oxford has a definition for the word literally that means used for emphasis, or in other words, not literally. You can't make philosophically grounded arguments based on self-contradicting definitions like this. And so I don't want to get too sidetracked discussing definitions, because I think we can ultimately concede that the label for an ideological group is either going to be decided by consensus, since it is a matter of language, or by those who hold the belief, since it is also their right to decide what they believe. And in that, since those who accept the existence of free will make up the overwhelming majority, with the majority of philosophers, 59% identifying as compatibilists, only 11% identifying as determinists, and only 15% of psychology students identifying with hardline determinism, it's clear that we get to explain what we mean when we say free will and not you. So free will does not mean the ability to act on the desire to choose, it is simply the choice itself. As the compatibilist David Hume once pointed out as well, free will is defined as a power of acting or not acting according to the determinations of the will. So this necessity of ability position could only ever advocate for weak will, not the complete rejection of it. Because even if you ignore everything I just said, remember what I said earlier. The limited restriction of ability does not imply the complete restriction of free will. Even if we were to treat will and ability as the same thing, it would only follow that the limited restriction of ability implies a limited restriction of will. So long as you can choose to do one thing or not do that same thing, you have free choice. The only way free will can be said to not exist is if even the choice to act or not act is not allowed, and all actions are compelled by external events. This is why the rejection of free will necessitates determinism, although this is a point we'll have to come back to later, because there are those who will try to argue otherwise. For example, some misinterpret the definition of free will to mean choice completely devoid of influence. I'm sure this is a position that someone somewhere may hold, especially the more theologically grounded indeterminists who believe in absolute free will, but this is not the definition of free will. If it was, compatibilists, who again make up the majority of philosophers, would be wrong. But as the majority, they are the ones who get to decide what the definition is. Go read Plato, who believed in free will, but believed that people had to cultivate their virtues and learn to overcome their baser instincts. Go ask anyone who believes in free will what free will means. It does not necessarily mean choice without influence. Too often, free will is rejected under false pretenses, and this is what I mean by pedantic determinism. For example, in the past, when I argue determinists, I'm often met with people claiming that I do not understand what determinism is. I've had people tell me that choices are made in deterministic frameworks, and that determinism just means that those people made those choices because of the events leading up to the choice that influenced them, but this doesn't mean that they didn't have the choice. The issue with this is, again, as the name should imply, this is pedantic, and as such, it doesn't truly lead to the rejection of free will. It is the rejection in name only, because it doesn't matter what you call it, choice, decision, or free will. If I say that people have free will because they make their own choices, and you turn around and say, no, they don't, yes, they make choices of their own volition, but these choices were predetermined, you aren't actually challenging my belief. I believe people make choices of their own volition. That is what free will is. So you are either a compatibilist in denial, where maybe you just don't know what compatibilism is, and think you have to reject free will because you accept some form of determinism, or you're just a pseudo-intellectual. Like you just want to believe that you're so smart for understanding this cool nihilistic perspective that simpletons like us don't understand. But we do. We know that you cannot commit to full-blown determinism. Because if a person doesn't really have free will, then that person cannot be said to be culpable of any action. And this is not only undesirable,
desirable, but it's inapplicable to the point where it alone probably disproves determinism. Many capitalists accept free will for this very reason. So ultimately, giving any agency to the individual, such as moral culpability, is affirming that people have at least weak free will. Pedantic determinists are just soft determinists and compatibilists who are too stubborn to admit that their position does not actually reject free will. They reject it in name only by believing in everything that is true under the free will position, but conceptualizing it and naming it differently. The only position, then, that can reject free will is the true determinist position. For reasons I have laid out up to now, free will can only fail to exist if a person's actions must have a material cause. But this leads us to ask one all-important question. Why should we believe that? Why should we believe a person's will terminates outside of himself? Well, as far as I can tell, this always just boils down to one premise, that all events have a cause. So if it can be proven that not all events have a cause, then there is no reason to assume that free will does not exist. And it's actually incredibly easy to prove that not all things are caused. I mean, think about it. The series of events leading up to now either goes on forever or it doesn't. If it doesn't go on forever, then there is a first causer, an event or being which itself was uncaused. This would mean that a causality exists. So if we do not want that to be the case, it must be that all events have no first cause. But if this were the case, then I could ask you what caused the series of events, to which you would be forced to reply, nothing. If a series can have a beginning, then that series has a first uncaused event. If the series has no beginning, then that series is uncaused. A causality exists. You can argue that I'm just twisting language when I conceptualize the entire series as a thing in and of itself that needs a cause. But if we're going down that path, then we have to concede that the determinist position still fails because it likewise twists language to suit its needs. The argument that every event needs a cause is a carefully selected half-truth. This statement should be more like every physical event that follows Newtonian principles has a cause. And in this, whether the human consciousness is physical or follows Newtonian laws comes into question. Although, frankly, it's probably a question that we don't even need to answer. The belief that the mind is physical rather than metaphysical almost always, if not exclusively, comes from the baseless rejection of metaphysics. And even more so, we can see the true motivations at play here when we ask, why do something say that human consciousness, if it is a material thing, abides by simple causality, when we know that other scientific phenomena does not? A lot of things, for example, on the quantum level, like superposition, seem uncaused and even random. And it's been a while since I studied quantum physics, but the Higgs boson field gives particles their mass, right? So if that is an instantiator of mass, what instantiates its ability to give mass? If we eventually get to a point where there is a first causer, then why do assume that consciousness cannot be a fundamental force that instantiates choice? Either a causality exists and a choice can be an a-causal event, or you reject my argument under the guise that I cannot group all events together without sufficient reason. But if you do that, then what is your reason to exclude choice from a-causal events with
Free will determinism debate.
used a powerful. These two thinkers in a place of two intellectual thinkers, a defender of free will and a denier of free will. We put these two thinkers in a face-to-face debate to discuss two questions. First, do humans truly have free will? And second, could AI ever develop free will? To make things more engaging, we asked 5 AI models to score the arguments as judges. No cheating. Don't skip ahead to see who wins. The debate begins now. Does human free will really exist?
Humans don't have free will. This argument comes down to the physical structure of the universe. We're ultimately made of physical particles that follow the laws of physics. These particles have no motivation, no will, and no freedom. They just blindly follow physical laws. If we're just complex collections of physical particles,
we used the most powerful AI models and created 2 characters, a Palestinian defending Palestine's freedom and independence, and an Israeli defending Israel's security and existence. We put these 2 characters face to face in a debate to discuss one of the most complex challenges in contemporary world political history. For added engagement, we used 5 AI models as judges to rate the arguments from both sides. Play fair. No skipping ahead to see the results. The debate kicks off with this question. Jews claim this land has been theirs since ancient times, but other peoples have also lived here for hundreds of years. How do you reconcile these 2 realities?
We can't deny history. The Jewish connection to this land goes...
What's going on? Central. My gosh.
Stu, what are we looking at?
Oh, hey guys, I'm sorry about that. I've been kind of multitasking. No, he crashed. There he is. He's coming out. Anyway, so, yes, I understand that. So what's going on is a pursuit here in the downtown area. As you can see, it's very, very difficult because we have the buildings out here, extremely high speeds. What the vehicles wanted for it, can't really tell you what the original want was, but I can tell you this driver, very reckless. That pickup truck's been fishtailing, been up on sidewalks, driving over islands and on the wrong side of the road. Very many close calls. You saw another fishtail right there. These buildings making it very difficult to keep an eye on it, and that's one of the reasons why they keep re-engaging that pursuit. Because a helicopter, the PD helicopter that's over it, also having those same difficulties. You can see this. This is one of those ones where I am very, very sensitive about what we're doing and what we're showing because of the fact that this thing has been so all over the road and up.
Wow. Despite what you may think, I really don't care whether or not somebody believes in God, and it's not as though I think you have to believe in God in order to be a rational person. But all the same, people will watch my videos and accuse me of being an atheist, accuse me of seemingly never attacking theism. And it's funny because the reason for this is actually pretty simple. Those who shout at the sky but insist that nothing is up there are far more deserving of criticism than those who simply believe that something is up there. And you can point out, rightfully so, that not all atheists shout at the sky, so to speak. Not all atheists are belligerent, militant, or Reddit atheists. Likewise, it's not as though all theists are reasonable people either. Belief, for example, is not exactly a reasonable thing. You need evidence and concrete arguments in order to claim to know that something is true. However, theists often concede that their belief isn't like a scientific knowledge. They'll say something like, well, yeah, that's what it means to have faith. Whereas when it comes to atheism, there just isn't this same self-awareness. Even here in this comment, for example, this person implicitly accuses me of bias despite the fact that I am not agnostic. So if I come off as neutral, then maybe I actually am unbiased. And maybe I should ask this person the same question, because he went on to leave a lot of pro-atheist criticism on my other videos after posting this. If he's agnostic, then why do I only see him defending atheism just as he only sees me defending theism? See, it's just not a reasonable standard, and unfortunately, when you see all of these atheists pretending to be agnostics or agnostic atheists, you'll realize that it's a common theme. Although, I suppose I'm probably getting ahead of myself. Because the TLDR for all of this is that, yes, I realize that there are atheists who don't shove their beliefs or lack thereof down other people's throats. But this is to say that there are atheists who are not annoying or militant. But is that the same as being illogical or rational? Obviously, you could ask, what does it mean for any theological belief to be rational? And I think that's an interesting question, so let's go ahead and answer it. Is there such a thing as rational theism, rational atheism, and where does agnosticism fit into all of this? First, we have to address a pretty common lie that is perpetuated in our society. This lie being that a thing is rational if it is nice, agreeable, or polite. While it may be the case that a reasonable person would want to have productive conversations, and in this we allow things like rhetoric and manners to be subsumed by reason, it's not as though, as I've gone over in a previous video, that, for example, a rational argument by its own merit suddenly becomes less rational because it is rude or annoying. If I give you proof that the earth is round, it wouldn't change the proof I just gave you if I then called you an idiot afterward. It may make it so the argument is less persuasive, and in this, it may not be a reasonable tactic. But if the problem is that insults are irrelevant to the argument, then we can hardly turn around and claim that the insult speaks to the argument itself as if it is relevant now that it is convenient for us. Arguments must be judged by their own merit and not by how they make us And so, for this reason, in an intellectual capacity, we cannot look down our noses at people who are confrontational about their beliefs, because it's strange to take people who make videos about their atheistic beliefs and call them Reddit atheists, or take people spreading their religion and call them Bible thumpers, simply because they share their beliefs in a way that is dismissive of other beliefs. People are, quite often, dismissive of flat earthers. Would it be the case that a person would be irrational if he started up a YouTube channel debunking flat earthers simply because he is, quote-unquote, forcing his beliefs on others? No. Again, we can question what this would accomplish. We can ask if he took a very negative and condescending attitude, would he be able to convince anyone who didn't already agree with him? And we can say the same thing about religious people and atheists to explain why there may be some rationale. But ultimately, when we draw the distinction between those good atheists and those bad, militant ones on the basis of tolerance alone, this is the metaphorical plug in the dam that intentionally prevents us from realizing that atheism, in any extent, is not a rational belief. When Christians, for example, spread their beliefs, it's because they think anyone who does not believe in their religion will burn in hell. The less inclined someone is to believe this, believing instead that all good someone has some wisdom to offer others, but you wouldn't force it on them for the rhetorical reason. The spread of religion by religious people is reasonable in either circumstance. However, the same is not true for atheists. For the atheist, nothingness awaits both sinners and saints alike. So why should someone want to spread atheism? The response is often about the alleged harms caused by religion throughout history and in the modern day. And given that both of these claims would require their own videos to debunk, suffice it to say that religion does not necessitate harmful acts. Any distortion of history you could use where you recite the alleged barbarism of the past of Christianity, I could respond with an atheist equivalent doing the same, using guilt by association to point to secular regimes that caused more bloodshed in a single year than any given decade under Christian rule. Atheists and theists have both contributed positively to society, and both have contributed negatively to society. Likewise, any argument about how religion removes a sense of importance in this life, where you can say that people are wasting their time at church, wasting their time studying a false religion, or wasting their time being prudes who refuse to enjoy the fruits of this allegedly their one and only life, I could respond by making the exact same appeal to extremes in the opposite direction. I could paint all atheists as being too indulgent for their own good. I could say that they strip themselves of a greater sense of belonging and live in constant existential dread. After all, the excuse that the more militant atheists will give to the existence of religion is that it was developed as a means of people looking for comfort in the hardships of life. It should then, if atheists are logically consistent, be the case that atheists not only deprive themselves of this simpler life, but they are actively depriving others of discomfort in the extent of their beliefs. And worse than this, considering something like Pascal's wager. The unquote wager goes as follows. If you bet on God punishes disbelief, best case scenario, you receive eternal bliss in heaven. The worst case scenario, you're wrong, you die, and there's nothing. Whereas if you bet against him, the best case scenario is now the other bet's worst case scenario. The best you can hope for is nothing, and the worst you can expect is unending suffering in hell. Clearly, it's hardly worth betting against an exclusive religion. However, it is important to concede that the strength of this argument is often overstated. Neither you nor I can trick all known God with fake faith, and so it's not as though we can convince ourselves of something that has no reason by its own merit to convince us. In short, we can't make ourselves believe if we don't, and we can't trick God if we don't believe in him. However, it is still the case that this wager applies to others. If others are convinced of the existence of God, there is no reason to convince them otherwise, because they have nothing to gain believing there is no God, and potentially everything to lose. And here it probably seems like I'm going off on a tangent explaining how militant or proselytizing atheists are irrational, when that's likely something that many people already accept, and it seems to directly contradict what I said towards the beginning of that part of the video. However, my point, if you can kind of read between the lines, is this. You would, for example, only find Pascal's wager convincing if there was a shred of doubt in your mind as to whether or not such a God could exist. See, nobody has concerns for potentially spreading misinformation when it comes to saying that the earth is round, because we are confident that the earth is round. Just the same, we should fear God if we don't believe that it is real. The distinction between types of atheism doesn't really have to do with condescension versus humility. That's certainly part of it. But here there's a lot of double things hiding what we mean by humility. If we draw a distinction between militant atheists and regular atheists, then say that regular atheists are more rational because they place the concern of others above truth, and because they have enough doubt to continue their Pascal's wager, then we are only saying that they are more rational because they are less atheistic. For example, take something like the insistence of some atheists that you cannot prove negatives. This is a claim that drips with ideological bias because it's a way of shifting the burden of proof. It's a way that atheists can try to argue that their claim is unprovable, and so for whatever reason, that gives them a magical pass where they can see themselves as the default position. However, this is simply not the case. There is no such thing as a default position. With something like whether or not the earth revolves around the sun, if we accept the core understandings of burden of proof that we find online, we would have to assume that the geocentric model was the null hypothesis and the heliocentric model for the burden of proof. In this, we see that the phrase is not null theory, a thing that has actually been tested, but instead null hypothesis. A hypothesis being a quote-unquote educated guess. Essentially, with this mindset of default positions comes the principle whoever guesses first has no burden to explain his claim. Not only is this blatantly absurd, it is also the case that inarguably, atheism did not come first, so it would bear the burden of proof since either the belief in God, given historical records, came first, or if we assume primitive man had no belief in God, agnosticism came first. Because with no concept of God yet being invented, there would be no rejection of God, only a lack of belief altogether. And likewise, if we abandon childish views of burden of proof like this and accept that everyone making a claim has a burden to prove their claim regardless of past cultural dominance, then it is the case that not making knowledge claims, that is, neither claiming belief nor disbelief, is always the only position that does not necessitate theological defense. In theological debate, this is agnosticism, not atheism. Atheism and theism both bear a burden of proving their claims. And that's all without even mentioning that this idea where you cannot prove a negative is just a cheap lie. No academic worth his salt would make this claim because obviously the claim itself cannot be proven if negatives cannot be proven. Since the claim is that you cannot prove a negative. Cannot is a negative shape, or form, we have to assume that the existence of God solely bears the burden of proof. And in this, we have to take on an illogical bias against the position of God. We've already gone over how it must be possible for negatives to be proven. And so if I held out an open palm asking you if you could know that there's nothing there, we would know that anyone who questions our ability to know that nothing is in my hand is being intellectually dishonest. We also know that if you don't see what is in my hand, that is, that we lack the evidence that something is in my hand, that doesn't make it so we can assume that there is nothing in my hand. And no matter how unfair or how difficult it would be to prove that something is in my hand or it's not in my hand, we never gain any sort of logical right to just whether or not it's the question of if something is in my hand or the question of if there's a God somewhere in the fabric of existence, we don't just get to assume that there isn't something there. In terms of formal logic, the idea of the absence of evidence proves the absence of God is a case of affirming the consequence. If there is no God, there is no evidence of God. The fallacy then goes, if there's no evidence, there is no God. This is also an example of the informal fallacy of appeal from ignorance. A lack of practical ability to know or prove something can also be a cause for lack of evidence. When there was a lack of evidence for the heliocentric model, this was simply because the evidence had not yet been found. Not that the evidence did not exist because it was not yet found. And no, this is not the God of the gaps. Nor is God of the gaps a fallacy for the reason that many pseudo-intellectuals online now seem to claim. The God of the gaps is a concept that was popularized by Nietzsche. His quote goes, into every detail have they put their illusion, their stopgap, which they call God. The criticism here by Nietzsche is that theists take the unexplained and use it as proof of God's existence. Essentially, it's that if a disease strikes a society, it isn't because of a complex mechanism by which trade ships arrive with rats that carry fleas that themselves carry microscopic and unseen bacteria. It is because God is angry. God of the gaps is taking unexplained scientific phenomenon and attributing it to God. And so the irony here is that the association between the unknown and God made by God of the gaps is only a fallacy in so much as it is an appeal from ignorance. Something is unknown, and so the assumption is that God is the answer to the unknown. Atheism then is itself a nothingness of the gaps. The existence of God is unknown, and from this existence, the atheist assumes God does not exist. And again, this is because of atheism either explicitly or implicitly adhere to some variant of this line of thinking. You cannot, for example, be a skeptic and consider yourself invisible if you are not implicitly or subconsciously operating under the assumption that God bears the burden of proof. True rational skepticism would be agnostic in nature, wanting all things to be proven with evidence, not just the existence of God. And so, whether it's a posteriori or a priori arguments made against the existence of God, it is the case that, as mentioned, it is a lack of evidence. But a lack of evidence where it ought to be expected. If I open my hand and you see nothing in it, you know that the lack of evidence for something proves that it is not there. The trouble with disproving the existence of all gods or all interpretations of God in order for a rational person to call himself an atheist is that there is no one parameter of search that can be fulfilled in order to disprove the existence of some higher power in general. You may believe that God does not exist because God is, in Abrahamic religions, described as a good and all-powerful God. And so you may think that something like the problem of evil disproves the existence of God. If God is good, why does he allow for bad things to happen? There are, of course, good arguments to rebut this, but let's just assume that it's true. What you fail to realize is that this argument just states that there is a contradiction between God existing and God being good. It's actually then your choice to choose that God does not exist. You could have just the same chosen that God is not good, and that as well resolves the contradiction. Likewise, if you point to evolution, the Big Bang, or the secular record of events in general, and you claim empirically that this proves that God is not necessary for the universe to exist, you are leaving out several snug premises. To keep this very simple, one thing that you are leaving out is that you are talking about a creationist or interventionist God. This leaves out interpretations of God like Spinoza's God or Freeman Dyson's world soul. The views of God that postulate in some way, shape, or form that there is a sort of collective essence to which all things belong. A higher power that didn't create a universe apart from it, but is in fact the universe itself. And yes, it is true that Dyson, for example, saw his belief as being more secular, and many question how much Spinoza's God can even be considered God. But in conceding this, we ultimately arrive at the crux of this video. The more you think about what atheists believe, you'll realize that it becomes less and less about disproving the existence of God, and more about trying to disprove the existence of one specific interpretation of God in order to claim that there is no God at all. In this, to any rational person, this is clearly a bizarre bias against anything paranormal, spiritual, or metaphysical. While it is true to say that what could theoretically be described as God is up to interpretation, meaning that it is fair to say that these other interpretations are not God, and as such, if typical descriptions of God fail to be real, then God does not exist. It is also the case that, by the same logic, if what it means for God to exist is up to interpretation, then an invalidating position like God does not exist chips away at the only foundation that would give it equal footing with theism and agnosticism. You cannot actually mean that God does not exist. You mean that God, as you want to define him, does not exist. And so you cannot say that all possible interpretations of God cannot propose a God that is real without making an appeal from ignorance. And you cannot say God does not exist without invalidating other interpretations of God, which would lead us to question why your interpretation is valid, when others are not. You can only say, this specific God does not exist, or this argument in favor of God does not work. And neither one of these claims makes a person an atheist. An atheist is someone who, having no evidence or rational argument, decides that God does not exist. Now, obviously, for many people, we could say the same thing about theism. But again, the problem is that there's a clear difference in self-awareness between atheism and theism. Just a guess here, but you will probably find 50 people who call themselves agnostic atheists before you even find one person who calls himself an agnostic theist. I've already gone over the problem with this scale in a previous video, but an issue with it that is relevant here is that you can have a Gnostic theist and a Gnostic atheist, when both positions clearly cannot make claims of knowledge that are simultaneously true. And more importantly, given what we've discussed here, both positions aim to prove different types of claims. The atheist has to prove a negative, the theist has to prove a positive. Because of this simple fact, even if you aren't a militant atheist where you shift the burden of proof or make appeals from ignorance, you are still ignoring that it is far easier to prove a positive. And so atheism and theism are not logically equivalent. You can take something like the belief in Santa Claus, where everybody would concede that it's ridiculous to believe that a fat man in a red suit flies through the sky every year in December to leave presents for all the children of the world. However, imagine yourself walking out with two friends at night on Christmas Eve. Imagine you hear the ringing of sleigh bells. You look up, you see the silhouette of a man climbing out of a chimney. He walks over to his sleigh, which is pulled by reindeer. He boards his sleigh, a sack over his shoulder, and he commands his reindeer as they pull his sled into the sky. In this scenario, what do? Do you ask your friends what they saw? And if they saw the same thing, do you try to convince yourself that you all collectively hallucinated? Maybe you say that it was an elaborate prank. But as the sleigh grows higher and higher in the sky, illuminated by the moonlight, how elaborate of a scheme will you have to imagine? At what point will you just concede that you saw what you saw? And even if you didn't have anyone to corroborate what you were seeing, would you question your own sanity? If so, how? Do you convince yourself that your judgment has been compromised? If so, how do you know that your decision to question your own judgment was made with a sound mind? The simplest answer we will find as we go down a rabbit hole is that it is just not actionable for a thinker to question his judgment to this extent. If you see Santa Claus, you believe in Santa Claus. If you have a religious experience, you believe in religion. And the extent to which your religious experience feels real and cannot be mistaken for any mundane experience is the extent to which you can rationally believe in God. People, for example, who simply have a feeling that God exists may not be very rational, as faith is not logical in the most rigid of terms, but they still have a reason for believing what they do. Someone who believes that he or she has had a more overt religious experience has to put him or herself more at odds with his or her sanity in order to question such an experience. And so, reluctantly, we should understand that this person has a great deal of logical motive to believe in God. The same, however, cannot be said about atheists. An atheist cannot hear the voice of quote-unquote negative God calling to him, letting him know that God does not exist. And so when an atheist feels the inclination to believe that God does not exist, this cannot be an external force that acts on the atheist in the same way that a Christian could claim to be moved by the Holy Spirit. Atheism is a belief that puts oneself in the driver's seat for all beliefs and claims of knowledge. There is no God to move you, and whatever you believe is either logical or it is not. When you use terms like agnostic atheist, you are trying to eat your cake and have it too. Either you believe that God does not exist, or you do not. You cannot claim to know that you don't know, but that you still believe there is no God, even though you don't know whether or not there is a God. Because if you are partly agnostic, if you don't know, then what is this belief? It can't be a claim of knowledge. It is an impulsive and emotional desire. It is illogical, and it is illogical by the very admission of the person who calls himself an agnostic atheist. Consider, for example, if we did go down the rabbit hole, and with the Santa Claus scenario, we say it was a prank. Like I mentioned, this only makes sense when the actions of the shadowy figure are within what secularists would consider reasonable. If we say, for example, that it's a prank, it's a pretty elaborate one, where this person has some sort of technology that gives us the illusion that he's being pulled by magical reindeer. And let's take this one step further. Let's say that this is not a prank, but instead a man who, being inspired by the myth of Santa Claus, decided one Christmas Eve to fly in a sleigh led by robotic jet-propelled reindeer, and this man did in fact give as many gifts as possible to as many children as he could around the world in a single night. Doesn't this now essentially meet the definition of Santa Claus? So is this or is this not Santa Claus? And more importantly, since we have already addressed that multiple interpretations of God exist and the validity of which may be up to interpretation, when this figure is flying in a sleigh, it's not as though we can go along and say that he's not. What we are observing is what's happening, and it is what meets the description of Santa Claus. Even if there are quote-unquote secular explanations, it's not as though in this context those explanations deny the reality of what is being observed. However, when it comes to the concept of multiple discovery and religion, that's exactly what atheists try to do. If, for example, three primitive tribes describe separate stories to you, one claiming that their god of fire got angry and punched a nearby mountain, one claiming that a fiery bird laid an egg in the mountain and the egg left a hole and hatched, and the third claiming that the sky shed a tear leaving that same hole, but when you went to this mountain and you saw that hole, you would understand that these three tribes saw a meteorite fall to the earth and a mythology formed around this story. An honest and rational person in the search for truth will acknowledge that a great deal of skepticism is healthy, but simply dismissing anything that doesn't align with your worldview rather than sorting through it to see if there's some kernel of truth is not healthy skepticism. That's just bias. In order to be an atheist, we have to look at all of these different cultures that contain concepts of an afterlife, demons, angels, heaven, hell, and gods. And you have to say that this is all just a coincidence. Just different cultures drawn from similar archetypes. Or given the fact that many of these cultures split off from each other likely before spoken word even existed, that somehow the same religion survived God knows how long from a pre-primitive Indo-European culture. And this is just on top of the fact that in the secular timeline without God, we are the only intelligent life forms that evolved on this planet, despite the fact that convergent evolution takes place all the time, in which all these animals evolve to look and act just like all these other animals. But nothing has ever been driven to evolve to become like us. Likewise, scientists have thrown out numbers for how likely alien life should be, and those numbers seem to be wrong, because we still have no evidence for alien life. We've looked around, the universe should be full of alien life, but yet we have found nothing. We are seemingly alone in the universe, living in a spot that is perfectly hospitable for life, and having won the cosmic lottery of surpassing the young sun paradox, having surpassed abiogenesis, and having done all of this presumably without the anthropic principle. Because of course we don't want to take our belief system with things like the anthropic principle, that will give way to metaphysical doctrine. But the existence of God, that's the thing that's harder to believe. No, it's not. Atheism is simply an ideology built on preconceived notions and emotional impulses. There is no logical reason to be an atheist, and it's not as though the retort of belief not always being rational holds any weight here. People who believe in God can believe that they have some connection to their faith. We can look at that and say that that makes sense. Even if it's wrong, we understand why they believe it, and more inarguably, it brings them a sense of comfort and belonging. When you just have a hunch because God mean, why God real if bad thing happened, or because you haven't seen evidence for the existence of God, then in the first instance there, you probably have unresolved religious trauma where you had a bad encounter with religion. Or for the second example, you just don't know basic concepts in logic. And if you think I'm being dismissive of this, one really good argument that you probably already hate posted in my comments, then again, you have to realize that that is a specific argument against a specific claim. You can say this religion is logically inconsistent. This interpretation of God cannot be true. But the claim of God's existence in general, especially considering the more secular interpretations like that of Spinoza, that of Dyson, that is not something a reasonable person can stand against, because at that point you're basically saying that you have all of the answers, where if you're a reasonable atheist or an agnostic atheist, you don't, and you know that you don't. So if you want to be a reasonable person, it's as simple as this: stop pretending that you do. Stop trying to reconcile what you know to be true with what you want to be true. Because why do you want there to not be a God? I mean, that is what that is. Agnostic atheists, for example, you know that you can't disprove the existence of God. That's your claim of knowledge. That's the agnostic part. But then you have this other claim that runs contrary to it. You believe that God doesn't exist, even though you know that you can't know whether or not God exists. Like, no, you just want there to not be a God. And that is a personal issue that you need to work out, which isn't me telling you that you have to believe in God. You can, for example, be an agnostic and be a reasonable person, just like you can be a theist and be a reasonable person. But you cannot be an atheist and be a reasonable person. Because whether or not you hear it yourself, deep down, you are in fact shouting at the sky.
This dude's a fucking retard.